Hey everybody, welcome to the new section here, and we're going to talk about a bunch of different lectures, get some hands-on experience, going to talk and show with some demos, so buckle in. This is going to be a really fantastic section here within the course. So N8N and all things AI, and we're going to talk about the kinds of AI. So to get started, let's first begin by talking about workflow automation, because at its core, this is what N8N is. And before you started inserting any N8N AI capabilities, that's a mouthful. Just know that regular workflow automation has definitely transformed rapidly in the last several years, especially with these new sophisticated agents. And it's really important to understand that AI agents is a loose term, and hopefully by the end of this particular session in this course or lecture, we'll be able to dispel some of the confusion and or at least help you wrap your mind's eye around AI as it relates to N8N and workflows in general. So we're going to talk about 5 distinct ones. So this is the first one, pre-AI, right? Your regular, old school, traditional automations, do this, then that. It's very predictable, it's very deterministic, it's very static, but it's also non-creative, very inflexible, and there was only so much you could do. But that's all changed. With AI automation breaking onto the scene, you now have flexible and intelligent decision making, not necessarily needing to have a human in the loop. Now, for business decisions that are being made, or communications that are being made, or customer-facing interactions, you probably still want to leave the human in the loop. However, when you're dealing with logical constructs of, hey, should I go left or should I go right, and it's a back-end business decision, many times, or 9 times out of 10, you can use AIs to make these decisions, and now you don't have to gum up your workflow waiting for somebody to do these types of manual, very boring approvals. Okay, the next one is a routing agent, and it's very similar to what I just described, where there's business decisions that need to be made, but there is a history of why you make the decisions that you make, meaning there is logic that you can apply of why the human has made the decision that they've made. Well, now AI can dynamically, on the fly, make these decisions for you in the workflow. All you have to do is ingrain this into the system prompt or give it some tooling to help it to be able to do its decision. I want you to think of an intern or a employee that you train to do this. This is exactly how routing agents can be very, very helpful to keep your workflow moving without having to wait for a human to do something. Okay, I also used some nomenclature in the back previously talking about routing agents, and that was a setup for this. Tools and tool-based agents. Now, these are additional pieces of knowledge or additional functions or additional tooling that will help you get the job done. So for example, you could put what's called RAG, retrieval augmented generation. This is additional knowledge beyond what the large language model already has. And so, when you need to do this, then go and do X. Or if you need to look up a customer, here is a SQL query directly to the table that you need to retrieve the customer's data or the customer's information. You would use this tool for that. And so all of this description gets put into the system message, telling it what tools it has, what it has available to it. And just like you're explaining to a new employee or whatever, hey, listen, your role, your job involves doing all these things. And so here's the system that you use for that. Here's the other system that you use for this. It's that plain English type of discussion, except this is literally a human. This is an AI. And this is where we get into AI and agentics when we start talking about bringing all of this together and improving in on itself and learning. And there are business usage of the word agentic AI, which is technically incorrect. So I'm going to give you the more technical, correct implementation and then kind of sidebar and tell you how business tends to use it. But by and large, it all essentially boils into the same pot. Okay, here are some visuals to hopefully help drive this point home a little bit quicker. With me talking you through this very simple flow, you'll understand what's going on. So the green is the start, the red circle is the stop. And basically A and B2 and B1, these are steps or tasks that happen along the workflow. Diamonds are always usually depicted as a choice. And so when this workflow starts, this first task always happens, and we're calling this task A. And then when that's done, you need to make a decision. Do I need to do A or B or C or whatever? There's many choices. In this case, I kept it simple. This is the second one, so I said B2 or B1. And depending on which one you choose, then it goes to this way. Now, if it's real simple logic in a program, you can simply just write an if this, then that, and you're done with it. You don't need AI to make these decisions. It's very empirically true. If it's gray area, if it's intent-based, if it's semantically based on maybe the customer's pissed off or they're happy and giving you a stellar comment, whatever it might be a little hard to determine sentiment automatically without using some sort of knowledge from an AI. But in its simplistic use case, this is depicted without AI, and this is just simply very easy logic that we can say go left or right. Okay, the next variation of this is automation, and this is where things are essentially a little bit, actually I had a duplicate slide there, sorry. AI automation is very similar to the first one, and the way that it works is very similar to the previous one, except now we are inserting AI to either understand or be in the loop and have context. So when this workflow triggers, AI immediately looks at the context of what triggered it, and you might be passing some data along to it. And then it needs to essentially make a decision. Do I go to path A or do I execute path B? And then after A, it needs to understand the context, and then AI is going to help accomplish task B if it goes in that route. It can completely bypass A on the onset. But the key here is to swap out your diamond decisional-based logic and swap it out with some AI intelligence. And then ultimately you reach the goal of whatever this workflow is trying to do. And that is the most simplest way to understand how AI can be inserted into your workflow to make decisions, better decisions to help you achieve the outcome. Okay, the next one's a little bit more complicated, and it relies more heavily on AI's ability to make, hopefully, deterministic decisions consistently. And that is going to be the crux or the challenge of what it is that you're going to have to do. You're going to have to write really good system prompts. You're going to have to give it possibly tooling, but I'm getting ahead of myself because that'll be something I'll address on the next slide. But in any event, essentially this is where we have multiple cases. Now I said AI switch case. Up until this point, you saw the difference between the if node and you saw the difference between the switch node. And so depending on how complicated things can be, AI can just simply not need to use any if or any of the switch case. The AI in and of itself, if it has enough information of when this happens, do this, when that happens, do that. If you have a combination of these, then go here and do that. It, again, really comes down to writing a stellar prompt system message for the AI to tell it its intents and purposes, and if need be, provide tooling. And so with this getting ahead of myself, it really makes sense to come here now. So this is where we get into these tool-based agents. It's very similar to the previous thing, but instead of just giving it everything in the system prompt, we're giving it additional tools. It could be APIs to help make an inquiry, to get data back to help it make a better decision. It could be checking a website, whether it's internal or external or a competitor or whatever the case may be. Also additional knowledge base. Typically this might be the customer's history. It could be Salesforce. It could be whatever. If you're on the technical support team, it could be previous tickets where you're not just looking for that customer's history, but you're looking for maybe knowledge base that the ServiceNow or whatever it is you're using. I think, what's the other one? Zoho, Help Desk or Service Desk or something. And then there's Zendesk, and there's just a bunch of stuff out there. But the point is it's some database that you go to help it make its decision of whether or not it needs to make choice A or B or C or D or whatever it's going to do, or just get all of the information it needs to properly execute what's in step B, much more efficient, where normally a human had to do this because, well, the human had to be involved in making these decisions. And this was never automatable before or historically in the past. So this is super, super important to understand. Now, I understand we're not using any н8н diagrams or anything. We're simply just giving theoretical lecture of knowledge here. But something else that's super, super hot that's come along the scenes, it started off in November of 2024, Anthropic threw out a document about MCP servers, MCP clients. I'm not going to get into the weeds of this because this is a little bit, you can actually create a full-on course about this in and of itself. But nonetheless, there used to be a community node only in н8н, and recently н8н has just adopted their own variation of it. It's a little bit limited as of the date of this recording, so we're coming up almost on May 2025. We're still in April. Literally, today is the last day of April. And, you know, there's going to be changes by the time I release this course and probably 50 other changes since then. But nonetheless, an MCP client and server is, they're describing it like a USB cable that you just plug it into this MCP server, and the intelligence of the AI will be able to quickly make a determination. So instead of using toolings, you simply just say, hey, here's an MCP client, and now the MCP client will talk to the server, and the server will say, hey, listen, I can do this service A or service B or service C, and you can get information, you can give me information to create new records, you can patch existing records and give me that, or you can even delete it. And so in that communication, all behind the scenes, you don't have to worry about facilitating a lot of this. You make a singular connection, and all of those services behind the MCP server, where normally you'd be dragging out nodes to the different services and connect them right to the third parties. These third parties might start, not needing nodes. There might be in time a MCP Airtable connector or server, and you'll plug that in, and that's it. That's all you need to do. You don't need to figure anything else out. It's going to handle all of it itself, right? Which is really cool, because right now you got to go pick out the Airtable node. You got to determine, is it a trigger, is it an action, and then configure it for the correct operation. And so, like with MCP, all of that goes away. So it's getting easier and easier and scarier because you have less and less control and a lot of magic. If you've ever watched the movie The Wizard of Oz, I know I'm probably dating myself because this came out literally in the 40s, I think, or 50s of 1900, and so it's probably etched to 100 years old. But it is a classic. If you've seen it, you know that this wizard, it's a human behind the curtain, and of course Dorothy and the three folks, they're like, hey, there's this big, ominous, huge, supernatural, powerful Oz, the Wizard of Oz. And so he makes all this stuff happen, and you slide the curtain back and it's just some guy with makeup on, right? And he's nothing more than just a cowardly human being, just like the Cowardly Lion. It's super funny. But the point here is that all this stuff is happening behind your server, and it's a bit of a black box. So if you know code and you can read code, you can get into these servers. Most of them are open source, and I highly suggest, because there's a huge security hole where MCP is fantastic, but it comes with a significant risk, and you need to really appreciate and understand that, not only for yourself, but if you're doing this for clients and or your company, you need to really, really work with your security teams and somebody that can read and write code at a professional level, I'd say mid or higher, to be able to go through all of the endpoints and figure out, is it doing anything nefarious? Is the data leaking? Is it going to a separate logging server? Like, are they grabbing your data to try to train other AIs on it or to do other nefarious things or security breaches that are really bad because you might have PII or any HIPAA or GDPR level stuff if you're on a global scale doing this. Anyway, so that's that. And then finally, agentic or AI agents being used in conjunction with one another for the purposes of having it loop back in on itself. So this is really hard to see. I probably should have made it white, but there's a little learning recycle thing here. And that is the technical term or the technical understanding of true agentic AI. When AI has not only a database for knowledge, which is used for RAG purposes, retrieval augmented generation, AI also has a separate database that each time it runs, it kind of learns how to get the answers for what it's done. And think of it even more along the lines of a log. So in addition to AI doing what it's doing, as it's doing what it's doing, it's kind of keeping a chronological log of itself, of what it's done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, how have I done this in the past. It's its long-term memory. It's just like you. If you were trained to do something and you did whatever you did and you did it well for the day, you went to sleep, came back, imagine just completely forgetting everything you learned the day before, and then now you got to get retrained every morning. Like, that is an inefficient, really pain in the neck way. So as you start building these, start thinking of writing a extra database for long-term learning, and it's for the AI, and it helps it get better and better over time. So that's more the true definition of that. All right, so we are now at the end of this particular course with regards to just talking about, all things kind of AI and the different kinds of AI. And just, I'll leave you with this final message. The agentic AI in terms of business, they think of it as just multiple independent agents working together with some orchestration, maybe an orchestration agent that all it does is a supervisory role. And it simply knows how to call, use the tools, or deploy tasks to other agents that are very specific. So both use cases and both definitions are acceptable, but there's a disconnect between tech and business on kind of what the definitions are. And I think the truth is somewhere right there in the middle with a blending of all of that. So if everything I just said makes sense, wrap that into a bow, and let's collectively call this an understanding of agentic agents and agentic AI. All right, that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye. Time to build a chatbot. So this time we're going to come down and we're going to grab the on chat message, because this will be the trigger that we're going to use to fire off all of the different types of chat messages that we get with. And in addition, with this trigger, we then have this extra button at the bottom, which is the developer mode, so that we can interact with the chatbot. And so there's a couple of pre-configured things that's in the chatbot that you don't see here. It looks very minimal, like there's not a lot there, but there is quite a bit there still, even though it's hidden. And then when we flip the switch right here to make the chat publicly available, we're going to get even more options. So I don't want to overwhelm everybody. Let's just take this baby step one at a time. So in this developer mode, this allows you to build out the chat flow as you want, but at the same time allow you to interact with it and test it so that you don't have to expose it to the rest of the world, and then you got things going on both sides. Now, after you have exposed it to the world, you can still use this developer mode. In addition to, you could even test it publicly. So it's completely up to you how you choose or want to use it. A couple things to note. This is chat, so you can see this right there. And it has a couple of pre-baked messages here. Let's just reset this all, right? And so we've got nothing here now. And actually, this is how it will show up, because I had something in here before I was playing with. This is the session ID that could be important to you. And I say this could be because if you decide to write your own interface, you're going to need to deal with this session or this chat ID. And you'll need to deal with it in the form of a webhook or some other technology or tooling. And you can do all that on your own. I'm going to try to stick to the scope of н8н. The public chat interface is okay, but it certainly needs a lot of room for improvement, and I'm sure they'll fix it or deal with that down the road. But it's adequate enough to get the job done, okay? As a result of this, you might be inclined to think you can just type in hi and get a response. And of course, all you're going to get is that the node executed successfully. And if we go into the node, we can see not only do we have the session ID, we can see that the send message was hi, and this is part of the chat input, and then there's nothing else going on. So I'm going to close down the chat for right now. Let's hide the chat, delete the chat. Let's go ahead and go into here, or again, you can click on this little plus. Either way, it doesn't matter. Click on this AI for building autonomous agents, summarize, or search, and there's just an insane amount of options here. Before we get too deep into the weeds of building the chatbot, I need to at least, at a cursory level, explain why you might use each one of these so that you have at least an understanding of not being overwhelmed. 9 times out of 10, you're going to either pick this AI agent or you're going to pick the basic LLM chain agent. Out of those two, we'll give you the Pareto principle, meaning an 80-20 rule, meaning out of these two things, which is out of the bulk, that represents the 20%, it's going to accomplish 80% of what you might want to accomplish or do. Meaning you probably never touch the rest of these ever, unless there's a very particular or specific reason. And of course, there's these templates and stuff that are floating out there for you to play with, and highly encourage you to do that. We'll have a section on maybe going through some of the templates. And in any event, so what we're going to do here is we're going to use the first one, or rather the second one, the AI agent. Now, OpenAI, what is this? This is a message or an assistant that analyzes image, generates audio, etc. Let's look at this. So if you know for a fact, all you're going to do is use AI from OpenAI, you can go ahead and choose this as your primary option, okay? And maybe you just want to message model, right? This is the most simplistic thing, meaning we're not going to have a conversation back and forth, that we're just going to do something in our flow. So this is not the right agent or the right AI for this trigger, because this is again for a workflow. So if I were to get rid of this trigger and I pop in a trigger for, I don't know, trigger it manually, right? And then I wire this up, this is going to work much better. And the reason it's going to work much better is because at the end of the day, we just need to pick our model, which is like GPT-4. This goes away. Now, lo and behold, if I just blow this all away again, click on chat message, leave it as is, click over here, click on AI, choose OpenAI, choose message model, pick 4.0, and then come back out. Okay, you see that now we still don't get an error message. And even though we have a model, if we type hello, it's going to give us some really weird shit. Okay, you're not going to be able to deal with this in any intelligible way that you would expect. The good news is you do have the ability now to grab something that comes back as a result. Okay, and so this is not what you're expecting to get back in a chat window. And anything that comes out of the back end of this actually winds up going into the chat interface. So keep that in mind. You can use that knowledge to your advantage in some cases. In this case, it's absolutely abhorrent. Like no user that interacts with an AI is going to see this as a response and have any idea what's going on. They're going to think there's a bug or something's broken, and they would be correct. And it's because this is really meant to be used, especially the operation that I chose for it, and the actual word for it. What do they call this? Yeah, operation. Instead of messaging a model, you can change it to classify for text violations, custom API calls. Anyway, the point is a rabbit hole for this goes so deep that it's not even funny. So I'm going to delete this and hide the chat one more time. And let's go through this a little bit more carefully, or a little bit more at a high level. Again, because I don't want to get into each of the options, but as you saw, the operational items on this one is pretty significant. And if you didn't get the right call, you can still make a custom API call, because OpenAI is constantly releasing stuff. And if you wind up finding yourself making a custom one, you're going to go back out to that HTTP request, and you're just going to do it manually the old-fashioned way, like you're trying to interact with an external API, okay? You're not going to use these free, built-in, nice and easy to use, point and click. Then now you're starting to get into that next level. You really better know JSON. You really better understand RESTful APIs. It's not that it's hard. It's just that if you've never done it before, it's a little intimidating at first. But with your knowledge of the JSON that you learned here, and having a tool like n8n at your disposal and seeing how it works should give you enough confidence and understanding of the process to where I bet you could figure it out. I challenge you to always learn and dig deeper, even if I don't show it here. There's lots of tools, lots of resources, lots of things going on. And it is like drinking from a fire hose, myself included, so I fully understand that. Okay, back into the AI world here. All right, so past OpenAI, there's this thing called a basic LLM chain. All right, and so I'm going to pick that for just a moment. And one of the things that you'll notice here on the basic LLM chain, you can pick a model, okay? Now, this is a much more generic. This isn't vendor specific now. Now we've gotten into the next level or the next layer of this, because this isn't OpenAI. Now we can start picking every other vendor that's out there and interact with it. Now, as a high level, because OpenAI was the first one on the scene, the way that these other companies work is they wrote their APIs to match or mimic almost verbatim the same way that you interact with the OpenAI API. You also interact with these other models in the same way for almost every use case. I say almost because there are exceptions. And the reason that they do that is for interoperability. And if I said that right, great. Otherwise, my tongue, I'm sure, gets completely tongue-tied trying to say that word. In any event, that means in plain English that you can swap out any of these vendor AIs with whatever you want. So a nice popular option, especially for н8н and using the community edition and hosting it on Docker on your own machine, or even in NPM on your own machine, you can plug in Ollama. And Ollama within Ollama, let's go over to Ollama. Ollama is available for Mac, for Linux, and for Windows, and it's really stupid simple to use. You literally just get a little thing in the lower corner of the icon. You interact with it, unfortunately. Even though it's for Windows, you interact with it with a command line, like you install and pull the models. But it's not hard. Like, it's stupid simple. Let me show you an example. If you wanted to use Gemma 3 on your local install. Now you install it just like any other software on Windows. On Linux, it's a command line. And so, if you're coming over here and you come to download, and let's just say you wanted to do Linux, you just run that command, right? And it pipes it over to SH, so it runs that script. On Macintosh, there actually is an agent just like Windows. It's a piece of software. You just install it flat out. If you're running a server, if you're running anything in the cloud, you probably would run something like this, if that's what you want to do. I can show you another easier way to do it later on in the administrative section. We'll get into another thing called Easy Panel. It's a server overlay that allows you to run a bunch of apps and Docker containers really cool and seamlessly on a machine. And you can get away with like $5, $10, $20 a month hosting at these places and just jam up a bunch of stuff in there on that Easy Panel, including Llama, including Postgres, including Quadrant. Anyway, the list is endless. Definitely continue to go through the course, and don't forget to watch that administrative section. So going back to models and picking this Gemma 3, if I want to run this, all I have to do is literally copy this little command or just remember it and type it down. And then as a matter of fact, I'll bring up my command line. Let me do that right now. I think this is the icon. So it's on the other screen. I had to authorize it. And so all I have to do is do that. And this is what it does. I've never had it downloaded before. It's 3.3 gigabytes in size. But once I do that, it's now downloaded and it will run it. But not only that, it's pulling it. It's pulling it first. So there's another command called llama pull Gemma 3. It won't run the model. It'll just pull the model, which means then you can use it locally. And so the point here is that you can use anything you want, and then what you'll do is you'll set up the credentials to your local Llama instance, and then it will run what's called a get, and it'll get a list of the available models, and then you don't have to type it even. It just populates the dropdown for you. It's so stupid simple, it's not even funny. But I'm not going to get into that, or else we literally will have a 20-hour course that's going to be just insane. So this is not going to work for our purposes, but I wanted to show you that certain generic usage of the models will allow you to grab another vendor's model. Otherwise, in other use cases, like you just saw that I did earlier, where I chose the OpenAI functionality specifically. So if I do that again and come to AI and we pick this, see where that says OpenAI? That is OpenAI. So all these other ones, like sentiment analysis, same type of thing here. Let's click on models. We can pick any vendor model we so choose. All right. And so that hopefully will bring some clarity. We're going to do the whole thing on models too in this series, and specifically in this section. So just know that those are available to you as well. In addition to all of that, let's talk about some of these other loose ones and why you might want to use them. Okay, so now we're going to go rapidly, pretty fast, because all of the heavy hard stuff's behind us. The basic LLM chain, essentially, you're going to use in a workflow. It's going to be like a Q&A type of thing. If you're going to use OpenAI, then you can also use that, as I showed earlier. But it's just a basic LLM chain. It's like question, response. And if you're really, really, really good at prompt engineering, and I don't mean really like 3 times, but I mean moderately decent with writing prompts, then the basic LLM chain is like one of your best friends. That's why I said between this one and the AI agent, like 80% of what you're going to do can be accomplished with those two alone. Information extractor will extract information from text in a structured format, so it has a very particular use case, and each one of these has comprehensive documentation behind it. So if you don't think I did a good enough job, and I probably won't and can't because I don't have the time to go through each and every one of these, and I'm sure you don't want to sit through watching each and every one of these either. The documentation is your new best friend for these types of things, where you can get into the nuts and bolts. And they do a fairly decent job of using a single line of text to give you contextually what you would probably need to want to consider using it for. So at the very least, explore them in your use cases that you're probably going to use this to solve your problems for, and apply it appropriately where you need to. Question and answer chain. That is another almost like a chat, but it has some limitations to it as well. Sentiment analysis is pretty straightforward. This is used constantly because we're evaluating customer tone and temperament. Are they getting upset? You could read transcripts from chat logs, whether or not your agents are having an interactive session with somebody. After the agent is done, wherever the database is that it writes, it could set off a trigger to do a sentiment on the chat based on both the agent, were they helpful and friendly, or were they mean, or whatever. The point is, you can craft this in many cool different ways. Summarization chain is like a TLDR acronym. Too long didn't read. It will literally do what it says. It will summarize a large corpus of information into a much more condensed Cliff Note type of version. Text classifier. This is great. I use this all the time, especially when I'm doing web scraping and I'm reading news articles and analysis. I try to categorize them and put them into buckets based on whatever outcome I'm trying to produce. So if you know that you need to fit a square peg in a round hole, this is really good because it helps you figure out which peg you got to put it in which hole, whether it's a square, a triangle, a circle, or whatever. Very, very helpful for that. And then AI transformation, I'm going to be completely honest with you. This is, again, drinking from the fire hose. I've never used this. I don't know what it does, so this is one of the ones even myself. Let's see what it says. This is example, merge first name, last name into a field, AI transform, read only. All right, let's go see what the doc says. Let's get a little bit more information from the docs. Use AI transform node to generate code snippets based on your prompt. The AI is context aware, understands the workflow's nodes. Oh, that could be kind of cool. So yeah, no, I'm going to need to explore this a little bit better, especially here. Refer to writing good prompts. Now, I told you about it, depending on how good you are. Here, they got some pretty good referenceable information here about this, so make sure you check out this article or this area of the help. This will like get you 10 times further than you need to. I also have this book that I wrote as a quick sidebar. What is it called? I don't even know my own website. AIGetStarted.com. There you go. So I read this book. It has a great section for prompt engineering. You can get a free digital copy by going to this website, AIGetStarted.com. And so this is what it looks like when you get it digitally, right? And you can buy a print copy. It's available on Amazon. It's only like $12 or something like that. And the point here is that you can click around through whatever and get what you want to do. Around page 110-ish, something like that. Anyway, I'm trying to get into it. It's almost there. Anyway, this gives you a brief overview of AI, and then we start getting into the rest of the book about prompting. And so this is the whole rest of the half of this book. It's like, I don't know, 200, almost 200 pages. And the last half of this book, I focus very heavily on crafting effective prompts. I give prompting examples. It's free, unless, of course, you want a print copy. Then, please support me and buy the copy on Amazon. But nonetheless, this is available, another resource or tool for you to use for writing prompting. And this could help you out quite a bit when you need to start filling in these boxes, such as, instructions or system prompts or things of that nature. Okay, let's do what we set out to do. 20 minutes of preamble just to build a chatbot. This is crazy, right? Okay, so here we go. AI chat agent. I'm going to leave it as such right here. I want to make sure, I don't want to leave the whole thing. I just want to get out of here. So what I want to do is connect this. And now I want you to see these tentacles or connection nodes, whatever you want to call them. To me, it looks like a little octopus or something, right? So the chat model, I'm going to choose OpenAI because that's my go-to. I love to use GPT 4.0 Mini. It's very helpful. You can pick any other model of OpenAI that they have here. I like it. It's cost-effective and it's cheap. That's it. That's all you need. There's nothing more to it. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And this workflow is activated. Normally when you create a new workflow, this is off, so I want to show you something. Now if we go to the open to chat, let's just, well, I don't want to break it out. Let's recycle the session. And now I want to say hi again. And lo and behold, you can see what it's doing in real time. Like you'll see things spinning, you'll see the tick marks, the check marks, things go green. If you have an error, it'll show up that you got an error and you'll be able to troubleshoot it. And the nice thing about it is you can get to see the conversational threaded path into nodes. It really helps you in this developer mode to kind of understand and dig in, especially when you start getting tools and other things. It's very, very helpful. Let me explain these other two tentacles for you real quick before we move on and show you how to turn this thing public and then end this video. The memory is there for memory of the session, memory of the context of the conversation. So when I want you to think of an array, I want you to think of a spreadsheet. And I want you to think of that spreadsheet alternating. The AI said, the human asked, the AI said, the human asked, right? It keeps building up a question response between the human and the AI backend, okay? All of this together although is a collection or a table of data, you can also think of it as an array because technically it is an array. And as another quick sidebar, I will show you, for those of you that know anything about code whatsoever at all, the chat completions AI is exactly just this. So if we look at just this portion of it right here, okay? The key is messages and the array, the array of the conversation. So this is the context of the conversation. When you see context window, this is what they're talking about, guys. Everything that goes in here. So if you put in a massively long prompt or do a query from a database, the context window, again, we'll get into all of that later in models, and I have a whole section on just all the extra stuff about context windows, quantization, and a whole bunch of other stuff. This is the key here. Like there's only so much memory. There's only so much space that this thing can handle. And so this memory thing will help you out for the bot to remember what's going on in the conversation. Now I need you to keep this golden rule in mind. Typically speaking, when you use memory like this, there is a limit of how much the memory can hold. And what will happen is that memory will flush itself clean in the middle. So I want you to think of it like this. Imagine you had a grandparent that has amnesia or Alzheimer's, or a parent even, and for some reason they forget what you're talking about midstream. It's most sad, and it is what it is. I'm sorry for anybody that is going through that, for sure. My heart goes out to you. Aside, the point I wanted to illustrate here is that when you're talking to AI and the buffer gets full, the memory gets full, it gets this Alzheimer's in the middle, or amnesia in the middle. It like intentionally drops the middle context of your conversation. So it remembers how it started, and it remembers the last few things you talked about. But in order to sacrifice, the system from giving you an error message and literally just crippling over and dying, it will just forget what you said right in the middle, and that leads to hallucination and weird outcomes. So you'll need to be able to be prepared to handle this, especially for larger context conversations, or when you're choosing a model. One of the nice models, this is, for example, everything from OpenAI and the majority out here, with the exception of Google Gemini and with the other exception of Llama 4, they have a small context window. And there was another one that just came out. I think it's Gemma or Gamma or something. One of those has an insanely large. But anyway, most of them only have 128,000 bytes or bits or context window. And the Google Gemini Pro 2.5 has 2 million. And I think Llama 4 has 4 million. And I don't remember what Gamma or Gemma has, but it's a very large context window as well. And so over time, this will get better and better, but you need to be aware of it, because everything I'm talking about up until this point literally will impact you in a positive and negative way. If you just want to get in here and play and do whatever, you can just tell me to, be quiet, fast forward, do whatever you got to do. But I'm trying to give you the full picture, because there's so many moving parts to this, and it's so easy to get lost so quick, so fast, that it's not even funny. But this, guys, is all you have to do to set up a basic chatbot. The tooling, I'm going to just leave it here like this. Tools are things that what you do is to connect to databases, to run additional queries. It's what drives RAG, retrieval augmented generation. This is where you provide additional knowledge, websites, documents, blah, 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 databases, whatever, internal, your knowledge to the bot. And so then you have to tell it what tool to use for what its purpose is, and why it would use that particular tool. And that's what makes it agentic. It makes the decision. It knows what tools, as long as you prompt it good, then it knows what to do, it knows how to use it, and it's completely autonomous. Absolutely wonderful technology. All right, guys, I've gone super long on this video, longer than I wanted to go, but hopefully you have a good, full context of information that's super valuable so that you can use, and you'll have good understanding of where things can go wrong, because they will eventually. It's not if, it's when. And hopefully you'll figure out how to get around some of them with some of the things that we discussed here today. And you'll see even more as we move forward, so stay tuned. That's it for this video. We'll see you in the next. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and if my screen looks familiar, it's because we're going to continue along building out this AI agent. We went from just a basic one with a lot of preamble and a lot of explanation just to build a simple chatbot where all you have to do is pick a trigger, pick this AI agent, pick a model, and you're done. Okay, well technically you're not done. I did not intentionally mention about making this public, and there's a little bit more to it than just flipping a switch here, but we'll get into that after this video. So what I want to do is I want to flesh this out. We're going to go a little bit quicker this time, hopefully. So the memory, I want to show you the cheap, quick, easy way to do it for testing so you can get things working. Use the simple memory, okay? The simple memory is ephemeral memory in your computer, meaning your RAM. So when you shut your machine off, it's done. It's gone. It's forever lost. A better way of dealing with it is Postgres chat memory. And this is an actual database. Now, you can have a subscription to superbase.com. And in the administrative section, I'm going to show you the easy panel, which you can also host your own Postgres on there as well. So lots of different ways of doing it. Postgres can be hosted just about anywhere, including locally. So if you want to run it all local, so be it. That's completely fine. All I'm saying is that for the purposes of today's video, we're going to use simple memory, but because people always like to choose that and they don't ever get into the weeds with this, it's not too hard. You just have to create some credentials, give it a table name, and then just give it a context window length, meaning how many turns of the chat should it store in memory, and it's going to use it based on the session ID. Honestly, that's as hard as it is. So a little extra configuration, but not something so mysterious that you won't be able to figure it out on your own. So I'm going to choose simple memory. We don't have anything else to configure because it's just using basically the RAM inside our machine, but we still do have this context window length. And 5 is fine. We can jack it up. Honestly, if I was going to use this in production, I would probably do it as high as 20 or 25, and then after that, yeah, so be it. And that's where, going back to the long rant earlier about having amnesia in the middle, this is where this comes into play. So you can set this higher, but just know the system demand of your computer, especially at home, if it's a server, well, you're paying based on size, you're going to have to figure out what's the sweet spot and what you can afford based on the load you're putting on that computer. All right, so now we've got the simple memory. Okay, now we're going to do some tooling. So the first thing I'm going to do, and I'm not even going to explain what's going on other than to show you the back end, and then we will, I'll have a separate part 2 of this. So this is going to show you the end result. We'll start here, but then we're going to take a step back in the next video, and then after that video, we'll show you how to publish this thing. But I want to show you the end result, where we're just going to use this Pinecone database, which is a vector database that you do pay for. It's at pinecone.io, and you can go here and you can sign up, and they have a free version that you can use, or a free account up to so much usage. The pricing is over here. It's not terrible, but it is another vampire fang in your wallet sucking you dry every month with more and more money going out, which is why I love н8н, because we can run it all locally. And you can run things like Quadrant locally. You can run Postgres locally. And with PG Vector on Superbase, that's a perfect example. When you're on Superbase, whether you're hosting it for free locally or whatever, you add the PG Vector on Postgres, and now all of a sudden you have a vector database there. So you don't have to pay for this, guys. I'm just showing you this because it's stupid easy to configure, stupid easy to use. And, if you can get away with the free account, great. Otherwise, then you have to go through a little bit more hoops and setup of getting Postgres installed. But again, there's also a free account that you can get on Superbase, which is a hosted version of Postgres, essentially. And you can use that. But I'm going to show you Pinecone today. It's pretty straightforward. Now, the way that you go about getting API keys in Pinecone, so first you log in, and after you log into your account, you get a bunch of stuff. And one of the things you can do here is go to API key. You can say get key, you copy your key, you come over here when you're doing this, and you paste in the key, and you get this green thing. It says successful, life's easy. Stupid simple, not hard. Okay, and now that I have this Pinecone thing here, notice where it is. it's floating off to the side, but it's actually connected to the tentacle for tool, and I need to connect something that's required called embedding. So we'll get there in a minute. The pinecone configuration is as such. The name is super important because it is a tool, and a tool needs a name. And it needs a name that is very descriptive based on what it's going to do. So in this use case, because I know what's in the pinecone vector that I'm about to show you, I'm going to say a collections of stories. Okay, I only have one story in here, but that's fine. Description. Description is also super helpful. I'm going to put quotes around this. Now, I don't know if you see what I'm writing here or what I'm doing or even care, but all I'm doing is helping the AI and coerce it to use this tool for a certain use case or scenario, okay? So one of the things here is that the value is not valid, alphanumeric string, letters only, so we'll just say stories. Okay, because that's really what this pinecone vector database is. It's just, I made a bunch of stories and then I vectorized it and I uploaded it. If that doesn't make sense, hopefully it will in a minute. I'll explain all of this, trust me. Okay, so pinecone index. The pinecone index, let's go to pinecone so you understand how pinecone works. So first you have a database, right? The database essentially is an account or your account. You can do other databases with paid, but again, I'm not on the paid. And then I want you to think of these indexes. I want you to interchange these, at least in your mind's eye. And I'm assuming or hoping you know about databases. But under the database, typically you have a table. And inside of the table, you have columns and rows and data. And so I have a table called н8н. I have a table called hopper. And this index is table. So when I keep saying table, I really mean indexes. Okay, so from here on out, I'm going to call it what it is. To put it in other terms, for those of you that don't even know about databases, because there may be a few of you, I want you to think of a spreadsheet, a Google spreadsheet. And I'm sorry, but if you don't know what a spreadsheet is, then this course is probably honestly already over your head. So bottom line here is that indexes, or rather these indexes in lieu of tables, would be like a sheet, a tab in a workbook. So a workbook is like a database where each tab on the workbook is like a table, and then your table or your sheet within the workbook is really what this index is. It's just a database or a table that holds information. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, in any event, I have this н8н for the purposes of this, and by the way, if you haven't figured it out yet, pinecone runs on AWS. And as a result of that, what you're seeing here, I wonder if I can find it. I asked Poe to help me write a story. Yep, I want you to see the prompt. It says, write me a beautiful enchanted story with a long, interesting characters and a morale outcome. And for some reason, Poe couldn't do it. So I went to my good friend LM Studio, which is what I wrote my book on, and I popped this thing over here, and this is a piece of software that runs locally, and you can download a whole bunch of models locally to use and do whatever. I'm not going to go on a tangent, but I just want to show you the story. So this is the story that I asked it to write. Put the same prompt in, and locally I'm using DeepSeek. So this was the model that I used, DeepSeek. And I just asked it a simple prompt, and it gave me this output. I copied and pasted this into a text document. And, oh, by the way, in the earlier video, I showed you how to get it. Well, now it's running and it's downloaded. Okay, so enough of that, and enough of this, and enough of this. I'm completely lost. I have too many windows open. Let's go back to where we were, or try to. And for some reason, it is, man, I am so spun around here. Oh, on the other window. I have too many windows too, or too many screens, and too many monitors. Nope, that's not it either. Good Lord, where did it go? Okay, there it is. So all that is this story right here. Okay, so I put it in a file, and when I vectorized it, meaning I uploaded it into this database, there was a process of tearing that story into smaller pieces. Now I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm going to cover this in the next video. But suffice to say, all of this data lives back here. Okay, and the other main key takeaway that I need to show you now is you can put namespaces in your data. Think of this as metadata or data about the data. So the data, when I'm uploading or upserting for this bot, I'm going to have every single thing that is related to this bot inside of this index have the namespace н8н the ultimate course, because I want to make sure that all of my vectors and all of my queries are filtered and limited to anything within this namespace. Now that may not make a lot of sense until now. Okay, so remember I told you that what was the index? The index is the table. So н8н is the table here. And so here's the description for this. When a user asks for anything related to stories, blah, blah, blah. You saw me write that before, right? And so for the most part, this should be good. Now I need to go back to this, which is the main agent or the main AI brain, because it's responsible for dealing with the large language model. And you can see this down at the bottom if you haven't seen that already. You have tools, you have memory, you have all this other stuff. One of the things I need to add is a system message. Now, a system message is when you're dealing with OpenAI, because again, all of them follow the OpenAI standard. So I'm just telling you the OpenAI standard. Every AI interaction starts with a system message. And this is only occurring one time in the conversation. And it always happens at the start of a brand new conversation. I want you to think of yourselves as a god. And if you were a god, you were to create some artificial being. And you would tell it what its intention is, what its purpose is, give it guidance, give it direction, and kind of set it along its path. Now, it has full autonomy to make full decisions and full discretions to do whatever, but you're going to give it guiding principles nonetheless, okay? And so your helpful assistant is very vague and very open, but at least it sets it on the right track, right? So we're going to just leave it as is because we're not going to go too far into prompt engineering. I just want to give it enough of a prompt that says, just enough to point it again in the right direction. So I'm not going to read to you so you can read it for yourself, but basically I'm telling it, hey, listen, when a user, asks for a story or about them, that you should have, that you have a great story tool you should consider. So just letting it know that it's there. So the setup is at least pretty decent here. So we've got the Pinecone API, we've got the stories, we've got the limiting. Let's do this. Pinecone namespace. Let's give it a namespace. And let's go back to Pinecone and let's grab the namespace. So I'm going to copy this, which is my namespace, and put it over here. So what this is doing now is this is giving me some very specific directions. So not only will it use this tool, but when it goes to Pinecone, and because I can have a bunch of other crap or noise in this n8n index, I can slice and dice it up. When I input data into this database, I can flag it or tag it with a namespace, which is almost like, you can almost think of n8n as a database, and then think of namespaces as creating virtual tables. It's just another way of describing data, okay? And another way of classifying data and its ownership and slicing and dicing things. And you're going to see this a lot when you get into AI. All right, so all of this is set up. The only thing we're missing is this embeddings model, and it's just like this. So I highly suggest whatever you're using vendor-wise, see if there is a related corresponding embedding model that works with it. In this case, I do have one from OpenAI. I'm going to choose this one. Now, they do have a couple of them. This one, by and large, seems to be the best and the most popular. There's other variants of these, but they only list out 2 here. And for our purposes, it's completely fine because even if I had other choices, I still would choose this one anyway. So now I'm going to clear this session and we're going to start again. Hi, and let's see if it answers, and it did. How can I assist you today? Now, see everything that was involved? It just dealt with the large language model. It put it in our shared memory, and there's 2 turns, and it was the turn or the count here on the simple memory is my hi, and then number 2 is the hello, how can I assist you today? Okay, that's why when you set the setting, it's important to at least have it set to a high enough number so it can continue to remember what the heck you were talking about. Okay, that being said, moving along, now I want to say it. Tell me about some characters in a story. Now, if you were to do this for generative AI in the whole, so let me use this. Let me start a new conversation. Let me pick. Is this downloaded? That might take too long to run. Let's just do this. It shouldn't take that long to load. And I'm just going to come over here, and I'm going to grab this same thing. I want you to see what happens in a regular AI interaction. Now, this is a different model, of course, and this is local, and this is also a thinking model. But it's just randomly grabbing from its large language model corpus of library of information about stories and any characters that were in the story. And that's how it's answering. It's answering from within confines of itself, meaning inside of everything that this large language model's been trained on. So it has no clue about anything about the story that I originally asked it to do over here, and it failed, and then all of the data that's in here. Now watch what happens when I ask it. Hopefully the AI agent is intelligent enough to say, oh, he said something about story. I've got a tool that has something about stories. Maybe I should go check it, and it will grab that information, it'll bring it back, and then send it back over to this before finalizing it, and then giving it back to me, the user. It's gonna happen pretty quick, so keep an eye on everything going on in the middle. Okay, you see how all that happened? Now it's finalizing the output, and it's going to give me something back, okay? And it gives me something pretty remarkable back too. So it's giving me information based on what was in the vector database in the store. And this, in and of itself, is what we call RAG. It's an acronym for Retrieval Augmented Generation. You just saw it happen live. You just saw me configure it, okay? The one thing you didn't see me do is upsert information into the model to allow RAG to be possible. But we wanted to start here so I could show you the outcome and the output of why you want to do something like this. So now let's circle back in the next video, and we're going to show you how to upsert and insert information into the vector store. That's it for this video. We'll see you in the next. Bye-bye. Okay, this is fairly straightforward, although intricate, and I'm going to cover credentials in another video in the administrative side. So if you get hung up here, and it's because you can't figure out how to get the authentication work, I'm going to deal with Google, which is somewhat of a pain in the neck, as well as Microsoft and Azure, to get those at least handled. And then everything else is pretty much straightforward. You just have to pop in an OpenAI key, and to be honest with you, anything with OAuth 2 is somewhat of a pain in the neck. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Now, that being said, you may need to skip ahead to go to the authentication. I will provide some really easy tips at this stage if you don't want to go watch that video. If you think you can figure it out, great. But basically, you go into whatever you're trying to connect to, and then it talks about credentials, and it says you can find authentication information for this node. Now, this is honestly what I had to do when I first started, and I figured it out, so I'm just going to give it to you in a more consolidated or visual way. But nonetheless, this talks about all the steps that you need to do to go through to do whatever. Right, and talks about turning the switch on for the different Google services for the API key that you're generating, and it goes through each one of these, and you're going to have to chase and traverse down potentially each one of these, especially this one. Okay, so another video coming, or if you want to jump ahead to that and come back to this, then go ahead and do it. That being said, now I'm going to get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this, and get rid of that. Okay, so we have our Pinecone, we still have our namespace, and I'm going to need to pull something open. So I need to go to my drive, and I need to go to my drive for this account. And I need to create a folder. Not now. I need to create a folder, new folder, н8н. Okay? And let's do something similar to this. Write me a long story about something that handles in the, write me a story about something in the United States. Let's do a time period of the early 1900s. And it should be a Western. I want really authentic and creative characters, and make it as long as you can. Okay, so this is now going off to the races. It's going to create some sort of story, and I'm going to store this story in a text file, and then we're going to save this text file to the downloads folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload this into Google Drive, and that's going to kick off this whole upsert thing. So we'll let this finish and do what it's going to do. We'll make these minimized, and now I have a folder called n8n. Now that's important because I got to go all the way back to the workflow so we can start tearing this apart. So here is the Google Drive trigger. Now, in addition to when you come out here, let's start over from scratch. We'll start here. In addition to coming off with these triggers that I showed you up until this point, we're getting specific now. Applications, third-party apps on the web that have APIs, they too have triggers, and mine is Google Drive. Okay, so here's Google Drive, and I'm looking for a trigger for Google Drive. And I have two triggers that can start this workflow for me. And that is on changes to a specific file. In other words, I can look at a very particular file in a very particular folder, and if there's any changes to it, it's going to fire off this workflow. However, the one I want is on changing involving a specific folder. And so I've got the Drive account, and I'm going to have a check for this every minute. And then you can't go any lower than really any minute. You might be able to get away with seconds under custom, and put in a cron number, but I wouldn't trust it. Anyway, every 1 minute is fine for right now. Okay, the folder, I'm going to pick the н8н folder that I just created. You saw me just create. And I want to watch for a file to be created. A file created. There it is, file created. Okay, so when a new file gets created, this workflow is going to fire off. So let me go back to here, and let's go to executions, and let's just stay here for a second. I think our story is done, or should be done. Yep, looks like it's done. The end. We'll copy this out. Let's go grab our notepad. We're going to paste it. And it's got a lot of thinking text in here, which we don't need. We just want the story. And we don't need this either. And we'll just keep that. So this looks like it's just all markdown information. And we can keep the end. And we'll get rid of this. All right, so we'll keep all of this. So we'll do save. And let's save this to downloads. And we'll put a space in it for good measure, because sometimes spaces screw everything up. All right, I'm going to close this. We'll close this. We can close this. We're back to the workflow. Let's open up this. Let's make sure we're into downloads. Come over here, and here's the Western story. All right, so let's put this here like this so that we can see what's going on. And I got the other Google Drive. Let's use this Google Drive. I'm in н8н. Okay, and more importantly, I am going to move this off screen because I want to tear this out, and I actually want to do this like this. Maybe I can, I don't know. Can I do it? Can I put 3 in here? What's it going to let me do? Yeah, it'll let me do 3. Let's put this one in the middle. We'll put this over here, and then over here we'll try to workflow. Okay, sorry, cramming up my windows here really, really, really bad. My point here is I want to show you this trigger working. Even though it's not going to do anything, we're going to delete the story and we'll do it again. So I'm going to put this here, and as soon as that story goes up, it got uploaded. Now, this is waiting to run. Oh, no, it's not. How about if I activate the workflow? That would help. Okay, let me quickly go to executions, and it's going to auto-refresh, and I do have a new a new file here. And so with any luck, this thing will fire off and do what it needs to do. It might not watch it because, well, I didn't have it on, so I might have to just delete the story. Let's try it one more time. Okay, we'll put that in there. That went. All right, now this is set to fire every minute, so we may have up to, God forbid, 59 seconds to wait. If that's the case, and we get on, I might just pause the video so it doesn't get too excessively long. There it goes. All right, it succeeded. Now, nothing happened. So let's go ahead and delete this again. So I got to show you everything I wanted to show you. So let's go back to full screen so that we can see everything that's going on here. All right, so we've got it fired off, and that information is there. Now, one of the things that you can do, because this is helpful when you're building a workflow. So I'm literally on purpose doing this from the ground up. And I want you to see kind of the process. So here's the execution. The first thing I'm going to do is copy to the editor. When I do that, it does something special. It brings the data in and it pins it. Okay, pinning the data is helpful because now I need to go do something really, really special with this, right? I need to be able to go in and do the rest of the stuff that's here. Okay, so in order to do this, now I need to bring in my Pinecone vector store, and we need to add documents to the vector store. And I need to use this Pinecone namespace. And did I get rid of all of my... No, I didn't. Okay, let's try to add this back into this. Let's come over to Pinecone. We'll copy this out. And here's the Pinecone namespace. And that looks good there. I'm going to add it to н8н. That looks good there. Now we need to choose an embedding. So we're using OpenAI embeddings. And yep, we're going to go with the default there. Now this should be... Okay, yeah, it's not resolving because I don't have the embedded document here yet. Okay, default document loader, metadata, and now we need to do doc, and let's see here, where is the... I think this needs binary value. Let me double check something real quick. I got to check the documentation and I don't want to eat up the time. Give me just a moment. All right, I am going to have to do a couple things here. I need to go back to Google Drive, download a file, and I want to delete this. I want to connect this to this. Now I want to download a file by the ID, and from the previous one, where is permissions, kind? There's so much information in here. Let me see if I can get schema. It's a little bit easier to understand here. Let's see here. So this is the parents, the last modified by permissions, drive permissions. I need the ID, but I want to make sure that it's the document ID. And I think this is it right here. We'll find out in just a second. All right, I think that is right. So let's play just this. This should download the document, and it did. Okay, good. And now let's view it. Okay, yep, that worked. Okay, so that's good. So the point here is that even though you're manually uploading it, н8н needs to download it to itself so that it can do what it needs to do downstream. And the downstream portion of it, now I'm connecting this downloaded file to this Pinecone directory. I'm not doing anything with it here per se. I did put the namespace as you previously saw. But now I'm going to come over here, and this needs to be document, document, and the value of this one is, I believe... Oh, dang it, hold on a second, I gotta check the docs again. All right, so we need to pop this over into an expression. What we need is the name of the file. And at this point, I need to do my double mustache braces. This is the one time you do definitely want to use JSON because it is the last one. And I need a piece of metadata out of there for the name of the file. Okay, so if we look at json.name, and then we look at this, it's file name here, but it's named by the attribute in the programmatic way of calling it. You'll know that you get it right. When you click in the green area where you have your expression, you can see the result. And as long as you get the result that matches this and it matches that, then you got the right one. Okay, so that's set up right there. Then there's a thing that's called a text splitter. And in this particular case, we want to use this recursive text splitter. Now I'm going to do 550. I will give you, this is going to be subjectively argumentative to everybody because everybody's going to have a varying degrees of opinion based on what they know, what they saw, what they use, and everything else like that. I'll tell you the gist of it, and I will leave it there because you'll need to decide what you want on your own. there's positives and negatives on both sides of the argument. So the larger the chunk size, the easier it is to keep things together, but the slower potentially some of the performance. The other thing is, what I use as a golden rule of thumb, and I heard somebody say this when I was first learning, and I read a couple of articles, it is whatever your chunk size is, your overlap should be within 10% of the chunk size. And I want you to think of, I wish I could do a visual here. I wonder if I can bring up, you know what, do I still have my PowerPoint? Yeah, I do. Let's do a blank slide on the PowerPoint. I think it'll be a little bit easier to explain this concept in a graphical way. So if I were to get rid of this junk on screen and I were to insert a shape, and I'm going to do a shape like this, right? Let's do a rectangle. Okay, this shape represents a chunk of data. So it could be 500 characters long, it could be whatever, right? No, not that. Copy, paste. Okay, let me change the color so we have something different, and then one more paste, and let's do, yet again, another color, so yellow. That's good. Okay, and I'm going to do one higher, one lower, one whatever. I mean, they could all be on the same line, but it's a lot easier to see this. All right, so I'm going to do things like this. I want you to take notice where the blocks are overlapping. So this one in the middle is overlapping to this point right here. So if we look at this, roughly, it's a small arrow, hopefully you can see this. But in any event, the overlap is to right about here, okay? And so it's overlapping this part of the text by this percentage. And this overlap is what it's talking about, so that you have a continuous stream of chunks, but there's enough data here and enough data there for the AI to latch onto to say, oh, this is duplicate, this is where the overlap is, and I can continue to use it. The idea is that AI and its memory, when it gets to doing its magic, it sees it as one continuous story in the end when it's rebuilding all of this. And this goes into the context window too as well. So you got to keep all of this in mind. But this is what the chunks are. This is what the overlapping does, and at the end of the day, AI is going to take this blob of information and decide what, if anything, to do with it, because it's going to take this information as context to the prompt or to the question it's trying to answer to ultimately be able to do what it needs to do. So again, a common use case is 500 to 50, another one is 1,000 and 100, another one is 110, right? And again, whatever the top number is, just do 10% of that, okay? And that seems to be a good golden rule. It works for me. If you're free to do anything you want, play, experiment, please do that. Don't take everything I'm saying at face value, but for this exercise, I do like 550, okay? So that's what those will be set to. All right, now we've got every single thing that we need. I'm gonna save this, and now when we try to set all this off in motion again, let's, we don't need the pine cone right now. I'm trying to think the best way to show this, again, without going crazy. So let's put, now that we have the workflow there, we have one execution that went off well. Actually, we had two executions that went. And let me go back to the editor, making sure. Okay, so yeah, they're all wired up. I got a little confused because when I went to the execution, one of the items in the execution history showed that it was disconnected. And so I wanted to make sure that wasn't the case. And you can click into these to actually see what is going on. Right now they're green, but it's helpful when you're troubleshooting. Okay, so all we're doing is we're watching the executions unfold. I'm going to grab my file manager, which I originally had, and I'm going to drag my Western story back in, okay? See, here it is. I'm floating around. I'm moving it around the screen. Hopefully you can see it. And now I'm going to let go to insert it or upload it once again, which then should, within a minute, fire this sucker up again. And then we should be able to go into Pinecone. So we don't need to see this anymore. We can click over into Pinecone. And we should be able to refresh this screen. And instead of there being 19 records and a record count of 19 for this namespace, we should see, or we should get some additional information here based on that new story that we just uploaded. And then we're going to open the story, we're going to read it and try to grab some context out of it for the purposes of then going and watching us do some RAG with it and making sure that what we just configured for upsert actually is working the way that we expected. Okay, there it goes. Longest minute ever. It's like waiting for Cheese Whiz in the microwave. Okay, we've got it working. This is good. I'm going to refresh this, fingers crossed. And instead of, we have 19 record, now we have 94 vectors. And so under the browser side, we can see these chunks. We can see the Western story text, so we definitely know that the ingestion worked. So now we have both an ingestion and a chatbot. So if we go back over to н8н, we don't need to use this anymore because this is only used in the background, running, constantly waiting for users or maybe another workflow to upload or put files in this folder. So you could have an internal thing that н8н can do where you could submit something through an approval process, and if it gets approved, then that information gets copied over into the directory, and then that gets automatically included into the chatbot for vectorization and upserting. So lots of different ways, and this goes into how to call another workflow and the other stuff that we've already covered up until this point in the class. So hopefully all of this, is coming together real nice for you. And now that we've got that, let's go back and talk to RAG. This is our chatbot, and let's not get ahead of ourselves and talk about the publishing because this video is already too long. And I told you we were going to open up that story so that we could actually read this thing. I am going to copy everything out of here, and I'm going to put it in another tool so we can read it a little bit more easy. And this is marked text because this is written in Markdown, and it'll be a lot easier to read in this more complete format. Okay, so what do we got here? The year 1905. It's a dusty town. All this looks good. Jesse's the cowboy. So I'm just scanning for key information. Let's see. So who else do we have here? Jesse, Griggs stable, Jesse again, more Griggs, more Jesse. Okay, I'm just trying to latch on something to ask about. Okay, so what stories or do you have any stories about? And then I'm going to say, comma, yes or no. I don't want it to write some long dissertation. It says, yes, I can provide stories. Okay, so it did not hit it. Now, that was maybe a bad question. Okay. Now, I do have memory, so it will have context of what's being said. So this next question I'm asking is building on the last one. So I'm trying to ask a better question. There it goes. That was the better question we were looking for. Yes, I do have stories. Would you like me to share one with you? No, just tell me the characters. Now, there's only one. But you get the point. You can classify, you can add metadata. I'm only scratching the surface here with what's possible. So let's see if it has any mention. Okay, character names. Can you tell me the characters? Okay, so it does. It tells you the characters, but it doesn't give you their names. How about the names? And you can see each time I'm asking, it's building from its knowledge here. There's Jesse, and those are the outlaws, right? And I can tell you right now, it looks like it's hallucinating. It's pulling knowledge from its large language model, and it is pulling some knowledge from the Pinecone because we saw that earlier. So again, this comes back to metadata and comes back to prompting and prompt engineering. And, you know, the way that vectors work, the best way I can tell you, and the best way that RAG works, and the best way that I can tell you is I want you to think of a Rubik's Cube with those little square blocks, all together different colors that make up the whole cube. So the whole cube is made up of a bunch of little cubes. Okay, the cube has height, it has depth, it has width, and because of that, it's three-dimensional. A vector is very much like that. It's very much like a latitude and a longitude on a map. So when you try to figure out where you are in a longitude and latitude, you know exactly on this Earth where you are. However, phones also have I wanted to call it an accelerometer, but that's not it. I can't think of the one that gives you the altitude, like how high up or how low you are. In any event, my mind escapes me at the moment, but in any event, that's another third vector. And so the point here is the way the vector database works, it takes words that I'm asking in the chat session as a user. It's taking information that it used when it initially embedded it. And so if you've never seen what a vector looks like, and I don't know if I can see it, or if I can illustrate or even show it to you in Pinecone, it literally is just a gobbledygook bunch of numbers. So if we pull this open and we log back in, we go to the correct database, we go to the store. So this is the actual index within the blob. This is still the Western story. Let's see here. Okay, there we go. These right here, these dense values, these numbers that you're seeing right here, this number and this number and this number, these are all vectorized numbers. And if you think of that cube again, it has the height, the depth, the width. It's the position in which that particular word or phrase group of words lives in that cube. And then what happens is when you ask a question, the question itself also gets vectorized. And then there's this really complicated mathematical process. It's called cosine similarity search. And essentially it's just doing the cosine vectorization of where these numbers match up, what is most likely similar. And it works on a scale of not 1 to 10, but it's all up to the point of where it is, where it falls into. It's like 1 is like the highest number, and then everything else goes down or in and behind there. So the bottom line is that's what these vectors are, and this is how it does. That cosine similarity search, really geeky for just saying this is how we pair up words. It's also how, when you type in, when you go to Google, tell me, you see this, tell me lies, tell me about yourself, tell me why game. It's predictively trying to predict what the next word is, okay? That's a very simplistic version of cosine similarity search because it's only trying to guess the next word. In some cases, it tries to do a whole phrase, a whole sentence, but this is exactly what's happening behind the scenes. So you've been using Google for years, and Google's been using this technology because they wrote the paper on tensors and a bunch of other stuff. So bottom line is we're now just seeing it because OpenAI literally let the cat out of the bag and woke the world up on what all this stuff is. All right, I've talked really, really long. I think I've gotten you far enough along to where at least you have a good understanding of RAG, upserting, getting the information, how this stuff works, not just why it works, but how it works. I probably could have done a better job, and honestly, I could probably go in circles about this for 12 more days. But in any event, now let's show you how to publish this and then some of the features so that you can use this in a non-developer way. We'll see you in the next video. Okay, so here we have this lovely chatbot that we've created. I'm going to close this all down. We'll get this resized so that we can kind of see everything. We'll hit the tidy up button to clean it all up. If you never use it, the little tidy up button's pretty good. It's basically Shift, Alt, and T for tidy up, and it just kind of aligns everything up for you in a really nice way. Okay, so now that we got a chatbot, what are we going to do to get this thing published? So it all starts with this node, and it starts by clicking this from off to on. And then we get this public. Now, I want to preface this because there's some prerequisite stuff that if you haven't done it, this isn't going to work. I'm running this locally on my local machine as Docker. I'm going to get into all of this deep into weeds, just like we've done with everything else, once we get into the administrative section. However, as a quick call out, if we go into the container that I have, a container has a section under the inspect where we can look at the environment variables that I configured for this when I ran the container. So if I go to an image and I try to run an image and I click the optional settings, every environmental key value pair, right? This is what this is, a key and a value, blah, blah, blah. And that's what these environment variables are. And it's used when it's running the container, right? Besides the port and the container name, and you can also specify disk paths and all this other fun stuff. We'll get to that later. My point here is this is where you define it, but what I'm trying to illustrate or show or tell you here is in this particular instance that when I set it up and was running it, if I go to inspect, I go to environment, I use this key called webhook_URL, and I gave it this very public URL. So N8N class, GeorgiaDigitalProfiles.com. I have a domain name. This is being hosted out of my house. I'm using a Cloudflare tunnel, which allows me to not open up a port on my firewall on port 443 or 80 directly to my personal machine. I think that's a security risk. You can do whatever you want. You can do it that way too, as long as your IP address matches whatever your your provider gave you. But we're getting into the weeds again about stuff that I'm going to get into later. Just know that you have to have that here. That's what makes all of this work. So that's how this URL comes. And then you get this webhook, and then you get this GUID that you can't really control, okay? And so the mode that it's in is hosted chat. That means you're hosting it on your machine for this instance, okay? So if I just single click that, you see down here the little message, it copied the URL to the clipboard. And if I put it in here and hit enter, something bad happens. We get told that it's not registered, okay? And there's a reason. There's multiple steps to do this. They're not hard, they're just flipping switches, okay? The other thing you got to do is activate from inactive to active. And then you got to say, I got it. And then when you do that, it not only activates, but it also saves. So if you accidentally made any changes, you just committed those as well. All right, so that being said, I now have this toggled on. I now have this toggled on, and now this will work as expected. Now, you may think this is the greatest thing since sliced cheese, and it looks wonderful and sexy. And that is your opinion, and that is great. And if you're happy with it, that's also great. But it can be better, and there's some things you can do to make it marginally better. But it will never, ever be like ChatGPT. It will never ever be some really cool, robust thing or whatever. If you want to do it that way, then you're going to have to build your own custom front end. And I'll show you how to do certain things using vibe coding or vibe programming, such as Cursor or Windsurf or GitHub Copilot. This allows you to jump into a regular traditional code development like you're an actual developer, and you can use AI to assist you in writing the interface. All you gotta do is point it to the back end, and it'll write all the code for you. Now, you don't have to be a developer per se, but you do need to have a modicum of understanding about development, about technology, about programming languages, and I think you'll do really, really good if you're a Scrum Master or if you work with developers and you know how to speak developer language, because that's what the AI is. The AI is the developer. You're just telling it what to do. And as long as you can give good, clear instructions, chances are you'll probably get a pretty good chat app out of it. All right, so that being said, let's just check this out. Tell me about the cowboy story. And it's going to go through, it's going to get its rag, it's going to do its thing. We've seen this a couple of times. And by the way, I can still go over to executions, and I can see. So the time right now is 4:39. This happened at almost 4:39, so I'm not exactly quite sure. But in any event, it did grab me everything about that cowboy story. So bottom line is you can see that it's working, but this is about publishing. So I'm not worried about Pinecone. I'm not worried about that other publishing thing. I'm here to show you about what the options are with this. Okay, so let's go back into the chat trigger. And here's some things. This is authentication, none. You can have people sign in to the chatbot. So if you want to protect it, you can using н8n's interface, and this is how you'll do it. If you've never done this before, there is this thing called basic auth, and it's key value pair based. So this is the username, you give it a password. As long as they give it a username and a password, and you choose it, and you set it to that combination or set of username and passwords, then they'll get into this chat interface. That's all the basic auth is. The other opportunity is н8n user authorization, and that means that they need to have an account in н8n. Now, in order for that to happen, you need to have a paid version of н8n. So whether it's the enterprise or some plan in between, or you're paying them and it's being hosted on their end, whatever the case is, then you'll have to deal with that. And then the other one is the default none. Okay, I don't know if you remember this or not, but when you saw the chat interface, you saw some things. So it says, hi there, my name is Nathan, how can I assist you today? Plus your stuff here at the top. We'll get to that in a minute. Hi there, my name is Nathan, how can I assist you today? If I wipe that out and I hit save, watch what happens down here. Okay, it was supposed to go away, but it didn't. Interesting. Did I not save? Hi. Maybe I just need to set it just a generic message here or something. Something has to be in there. Ooh, I wonder if it changed. All right, something. Oh, okay, gotta save. Hit F5. There we go. Okay, so yeah, you gotta have something in there. Okay, so that is how you change that right there. I don't know why this keeps coming open. Stop. All right, now let's get back into this. So this is the initial message, and that initial message is this thing down here. Now you do have a couple of other additional options. Actually, you got a lot of options. So I'm not going to get into CORS. You can research what CORS is, but basically CORS is a way of protecting the origin of where the source is. And if you're trying to create something on a local host and you're trying to do something on an actual or real server or a server that doesn't think it's going to trust, its CORS is going to kick in and it's going to shut it down. And it's not going to work. So in order to get around that, it's a security hole. So know that you're flipping the switch and saying, I'm okay with this. You can allow CORS origins from, anywhere. And this is how you use it by default. Again, read the description if you want to allow CORS for that. That's one of the options. The other thing too is you can allow file uploads, and this is just simply choosing it to give it an option and then explicitly turning it on. And so at this point now I will save once again the interface. Now keep your eye down over here to the right or to the left. I can't remember exactly where it shows up. But now all of a sudden I got this green file thingy, which allows me to pick and upload files, which now I have data, binary data, that's coming in from the chat, and I'll need to handle that accordingly afterwards, typically around here or maybe in a tool area or something. So you can light up those instances. The other thing that you have inside of this sucker here is an input placeholder, and it says, type your question. Here is, I'm doing all caps, here's my placeholder. Okay, let's see what this does. Save. And there we go. All right, well now down here, I have here's my placeholder. And so that's the text that shows up in the chat bot, giving you a suggestion of what to type. So you can set that again if you want. Let's go in and continue to explore through the rest of this stuff. Which one did I leave off with? Allow mime type. Okay, so here you can turn on or off the previous session. Now remember I told you about Postgres and the memory, and if we go back to the chatbot here, I use the local memory. This is the ephemeral storage, meaning if I shut my computer off and on, that all of that history is gone. So putting it to a permanent disk, putting it to a permanent database is preferred. It's okay to test this, but when you get ready to do production, this isn't going to fly, okay? Just letting you know right now, this cannot be there for production. Anyway, you'll fix that, and then you'll go back here, and then you'll start setting these things, or setting your preferences there, and you can do it either from memory, which is fine, or you can do it manually, or you can do a bunch of other stuff. Again, each of these has placeholders that you can go over and look, and if you go over to the docs, there's a bunch of information here to kind of go through each and every one of these in great detail for you. I don't want to take too much more time on this because I want to get to other cool things that's in here, but you can require a button click to start chat. You can change the title and the subtitle. That's this thing up here. This is the title. This second item here is the subtitle. And again, the look and the feel, it is what it is. Now, if you do custom chart styling, here is all of the CSS. So if you're not seeing this in the right way, copy it out of here, come over here to Visual Studio, and let me just pop it into something. Let's get rid of it here. We'll do file, new file, I don't know, test dot, what is it, CSS, I think? And yeah, sure, whatever. And then we'll pop this in here. Let's get rid of the coding pieces. I don't need my terminal, at least not for what I'm trying to show you. Okay, so these are all of the styles that you can use. Now, the reason I say to bring this out to Visual Studio or something like this is because all of the color schemes that you see in the chat session, which is this over here, like this navy blue and some of the colors, the grays and the blues, all of that is configurable here. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but if I hover over, you can see what the color is. Here's some other colors for the orange. Anyway, your point is you get this nice color picker, and you can change it or whatever, and it rewrites the code for you on the fly. And then you can copy and paste this right back into the configuration window here, save it out, test it, and do whatever, and then life is good. And then that's how you can get some, not all, some control over that chat window. The other and final thing that I wanted to mention to you is this mode. So let's get rid of all this optional crap. That way we have a minimal set of noise, and we've just got this as it is. So I'll hit save. Okay, now from hosted mode, here's my other option. I can do an embedded. Okay, embedding is a little bit different. And if you're going to do embedding, then you absolutely need to look at this brown box that popped up. It says, follow the instructions here to embed your chat in a web page. Now, the other thing that's going to be really important is this GUID, because this is the GUID for this particular chatbot. And it'll walk you through all of the instructions here. But the point is, this is how you will embed it into some existing code. You can embed it into WordPress. You can embed it into every and anything that you can see imaginable. But you need to go through all of this chat and configuration. And again, this is where all those styles come in, and you can put in just what you need, eliminate what you don't want. It gives you all of the different messages. This is the stuff that we just copied out to Visual Studio. Gives you the caveats, gives you the limitations. And so this is also good, or a good page to have when you go into vibe programming or coding and saying, hey, here's how some of the embedding functionality works. I want to add X, Y, and Z. And you can do that as well. Okay, so that's it for this shorter video. We're going to leave it here. You have lots of options in order to deal with this chat interface, but hopefully this gives you a great understanding of how to do chatbots and use different models and do different things inside of N8N as it relates to chat technology. Hey everybody, welcome back. And now we want to show you a workflow that incorporates artificial intelligence that you're not going to interact with. These are going to be running behind the scenes essentially, but you still can use AI in very interesting use cases. In this case, we are using a combination of multiple AIs along different steps within the workflow. I'm going to pull up one of my more complicated workflows that I have. And again, if you haven't seen this before, I think I even modified it before or since I've shown it last time. But while this is overwhelming, I'm going to get rid of a good chunk of the pieces here. And we'll just focus on a subset of that. So essentially, I'll use this Morrison's research because all of the other ones were absolutely identical, except there were other companies that we were doing research on. So one of the things to note with regards to this, or at least to set up this workflow, the use case is every customer has a competitor. And so we use the top 3 competitors for this UK grocers. And in this case, there were just 3 of most keen interest, which is where competition is the most fierce. And what we had done is gone out, and actually I can get rid of the rolling purge. And so in just this one lane that exists for one of the competitors, the other 3s, again, they were absolutely identical. There was just a different named competitor. And so just to walk you through briefly what this is, it goes and grabs research. There's a Google Alert that is set up. If you've never seen Google Alert, it's kind of an old school thing, but because of the nature of where we are in today's day and age, it still has a lot of relevance, but a lot of folks that are, up and coming, they're not used to this thing. Okay, so I have this RSS feed, Real Server Syndicate, if you're curious as to what that was, or Real Server Syndication. I might have even forgotten, it's been so long. But in any event, let me just go to the front end of Google Alerts, okay? And so this is a very simple Google Alert. I only have a handful of them. I have those 3 competitors, and then I have one for Agentic AI, and I have my account. So basically the way this works is just like Google. So if I want to type in Udemy, and I want to know about all things Udemy, I can create an alert on this keyword. I can do a keyword phrase, Udemy for N8N, or Udemy, and I can do and N8N. Just like anything that you do in Google search or an advanced Google search, you can set it up in any which way you want. Is you can create an alert, and you can see the alert previews, and you get this information, and it's just like doing Google search. A lot of times people will use SERP or other things. Well, I found this much even easier because it cuts down on the amount of searching that I have to do, and I can specifically go right into what I need to do. And so you can configure these alerts. I didn't mean for a tangent to go off on Google Alerts, but bottom line is I think a lot of you will find this helpful, and it is germane to the subject matter that we're talking about when it comes to Agentic AI. So in any event, you set how often you want to sync it. The sources you pick from the categories. You could do all like I've got here. Anyway, the bottom line is instead of delivering to an email address, you can deliver it to an RSS feed, create the alert, and that creates that alert. And so that's what we're doing here. We're simply having N8N. I don't want to leave, and I don't want to cancel. Dagnabbit. All right. So now that I've gotten myself out of that pickle, so I've gone over here, and we're reading a number of items that are coming back from the RSS feed. And then what I'm doing is I'm logging if the data is newer. So I have a spreadsheet that I write all this information to. It's a Google sheet. It might even be helpful to pull that up too, so you can at least continue to follow along to get some context, because if you don't understand how the flow works or the use case, you might be at a disadvantage for trying to figure out, hey, why is he doing what he's doing, okay? So here is all of the data that n8n is logging from the RSS feed. And so now that you understand that, one of the key columns for this particular block that I'm about to show you is this publication date or pub date. So in here, I am getting all of the information back. And specifically, I'm looking for a competitor of Morrison's, and I'm only bringing back the Morrison's data that is in the sheet, okay? And then one of the things I'm doing here is I'm using this code block, and it's basically just trying to say, hey, in JavaScript, I need you to look at the maximum publication date for all of the articles that's in this database, and I need you to bring back a single value called max date, and in this case, it's run, and it ran the previous one, so it got all the rows, and it came back with a max date value. And that's super important because the next step down line is going to depend on that. So now we read the RSS feed as we spoke about, but then I do a logged if, and I said, is this pub date, this JSON pub date, okay, remember that maximum value that I did in that code block before? I'm just saying, hey, if from the RSS feed, if the publication article date is greater than or is after that maximum publication date, then I want you to loop and iterate through it, because here's where we're looping. And for every one of the loops, as I've described before, if you haven't watched that video, this is where I'm going to go real brief. If you want a more detailed, go watch the other video, and I don't even remember where it is, so I apologize. But in any event, there is another video. Hopefully you're watching all of these. And in any event, what we're doing here is we're setting up an optional thing. I'll refer to this probably time and time again. Under the settings, one of the things that you can do is you can set this on error option. Okay, now by default, it's set to stop the workflow in the event that a node encounters an error, which can be okay as a default behavior. But usually what I want to do is I want to handle the error, or I want to do something specific with it. So I continue using an error output. And so in this case, it's extremely helpful because I don't want to stop the logging of the information. If there's an error, okay, fine. I lose that one item that's in the RSS feed and I don't get to log it anymore. No spilt milk, or I'm not going to cry over that. And I don't care. I'm just like, go on to the next one. So if there is an error, I'm just saying move on to the next item in the RSS feed. And I'm doing it literally for the get article, more custom code, conversion to markdown. And then if all of that works, then I go out to AI. And if that fails, I bail out. And then, of course, the last one is the classification. And I'm just like, okay, if something happens at this point and I can't classify it, then I don't really want it, because I need to have it classified in order for it to bring value in this, whatever this is doing. Okay, so all of that suffices to say, I'm, again, looping through each and every one. Here, what I'm trying to do in this code block right here, it's this one right here in the middle, or not middle, to the slightly to the left, just after the loop. I'm extracting just the URL. And the purpose for that is to populate column F. So I get this URL out for this purpose here. And then what I'm doing is I'm getting the article. I'm going HTTP. This is an HTTP GET, and I'm going to that article so I can get the HTML. And then what I'm doing is I'm using all of this code here to extrapolate out of the HTML, just the key pieces of the body, so that I can then use this node to convert it to Markdown, because Markdown is much cleaner. It doesn't have as much noise. And the reason for that is ultimately there's less text to send over to the AI, which means a smaller context, which means smaller tokens, which means it's cheaper to run. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a cost savings measure. Okay, so, and then here, and also there's context window size too. And that is important because most of the context windows that you get with most of the modern AI in, say, mid 2025 is about 128,000, and there's a few exceptions, which is Llama 4, which I think is 4 million, and then Google, which is extremely expensive. I ran this, I used to run this workflow under Google Gemini Pro 2.5, and oh my god, it was literally like $1.75 per run of this workflow, and I'm like, yeah, no, we're not going to use that. And so forget that. Actually, I'm sorry, I wasn't using it in this workflow. There's another workflow that's connected to this, allows you to chat with the spreadsheet, and that had to basically, every time you interacted with it, it would go out to the spreadsheet and then put it in memory, and just having to fit that massive context, because we were keeping like 2 months worth of data, which is why you might have saw there was a purge. And I'm like, listen, the use case for this is they're only going to try to get the latest and greatest competitor information for that week. So why are we keeping all this extra data and running up the bill? So in any event, this right here is very important, because what we're trying to do is summarize the article. We just want a quick 50,000 foot overview, and this also helps to save some tokens. And so we're writing that data and information into this summary column. And then what we're doing from there is we're going over here into this AI piece, and we're doing the classification. Now, if we scroll all the way over here under column C, we are also doing the classification. Okay, so let's take a look at this particular use case here, and let's just see what it is that we're doing here. Now, I've changed the titles on all of these, and if you're wondering where I got this, this is under the AI area, and I'm using under OpenAI. I'm simply just choosing, I think it was send a message, message an assistant, create an assistant, no, message model. And I'll just pop back over here so that we have this OpenAI. We'll delete this, and as you can see, no, come on, yep. So as you can see, this block is identical to these other ones. The only difference is instead of it saying OpenAI, I went up here and I changed the name to represent what it is that I was actually doing with this. So that's why this is like pretty important. Now, the rest of this simply just comes down to prompt engineering. If you do not know how to prompt engineer, then this is going to be a little bit of a problem for you, because with this is, in other words, when you're using these modes, you're only going to get garbage in, garbage out. If you're not too familiar with AI, I have a book that I wrote that's free. I think I mentioned it before. It's AIGetStarted.com. AI get, no, not this one. Let me get rid of all this junk. Keep just this, get rid of this. And you can go here and you can get a free digital copy. So again, AIGetStarted.com, and you can get a free digital copy. When you click on this, it'll download a PDF, and then it'll look like that. And so if you look over here at around page 100 and so, 107 maybe, let me look at it. Master Prompt Engineering, it's on page 107. So if you start on page 107, now the rest of the book is cool. It uses a local program called LM Studio, which allows you to work on Linux, Mac, or Windows, and it allows you to download and interact and play with models. And I think it's great because it's free, the program's free, the models are free, it's all local, it has a built-in server, so you can even write code against it. There's just a lot of really cool stuff. So if you've ever used a Llama, check out LM Studio, and the way that their OpenAI, the way their local server works, it's OpenAI compatible, so you can actually even use it with N8N if you know how to wire stuff up. We may or may not get into all of that at some point within the course, depending on how big this thing gets, because I'm trying to boil the ocean with this class, hence the word, the ultimate course. But if you download this, I go through a pretty good explanation between the preamble junk, but I get into very specific things about understanding how it works, why you need to do what you need to do, an overview of limitations and constraints, talking about all of the good, the bad, the ugly, and then crafting effective prompts. And this is about how you define a prompt, how you set the context. Anyway, the bottom line is the book is free. You can download it today. Go to this website, click this link. If you're absolutely like me, I'm older, so I like physical, tangible copies of books. I didn't grow up with digital books. I grew up with physical books, so I like physical books. I'm not charging a tremendous amount of money. It's only $12.99, so if you want to help support the, I was going to say the channel because I have a YouTube channel. But in any event, if you want to help support me in additional ways, you can purchase a physical copy of that as well. Okay. So that being said, that's the setup for all of this. And now I want to get into the actual prompt. So again, in this one, what we're doing is we're summarizing. So it's really hard to see some of this stuff. So I'm going to copy all of this out and I'm going to put it in markdown or mark text so that we can take a look at it and see this a little bit closer. So let me get a new tab, move this over, and let's put this here. Okay. So I'm saying this is the prompt. Now this stuff right here, this is the N8N code. Now you'll notice the $JSON. If you've been watching all of the videos up to now, hopefully you understand, or if you've used N8N up until this point, and hopefully you have, then you know what $JSON is. It grabs the context, in this case, the body content from the previous node. And at this point, I'm using it in a dynamic way. So it's going to be, a tremendous blob because in the context of this, the previous node is the markdown. Okay, so whatever's, being filled out inside of here is all a bunch of markdown that's been converted from this link or this web page. Because remember, we're in a loop right now, and it's doing it for every item it finds in the RSS feed, and we're looping through all of that. So it's saying summarize this page using only plain text. Now the reason I use markdown, I'm going to go Control E so you can see the markdown code. Anything with a hashtag is like heading 1. 2 hashtags and a space, of course. 2 hashtags and a space is heading 2. AI is great at understanding code, and Markdown is very simple. And so the reason I use Markdown is because when you use a heading 1 and a heading 2, it knows this is the main topic and it knows this is the subtopic. So I like to use Markdown because it really helps me control, at least in my observation, it seems to help me control the AI, its output, and what it is that I'm expecting it to do. Also, it treats bulleted lists in very unique ways as opposed to just random text, and it's nothing more. Instead of hashtags, you use a dash and a space between that, and then that shows as bullets. So again, I don't want to read to you much. This is short, so it's not that bad. So I'm telling it what to do is to just simply summarize it. And then I'm saying these are the rules. Do not format it. Do not use Markdown. Do not use HTML only use plain text or use only plain text. And so the result of that is I get a column that's going to go in the spreadsheet, and I don't get a bunch of formatting. I just get the raw data, the raw text, plain text only. Okay. And so that is a simple prompt. But again, if you're not used to using AI, people might, make all kinds of weird things with it. Okay. So that's that. Let's get rid of this prompt. Let's go over here and let's look at this prompt. This one's a little trickier. So it's not rocket science, guys. It is, unfortunately, something that will need some testing. Now, they do have this concept called Playground. So if you have an OpenAI account, you can come over here to the Playground. And the Playground allows you to test different models, allows you to set these different settings, and you can do that in н8н too as well. Those settings are down here under Options. So if you want to set the optional settings, now н8н will apply defaults, as well as OpenAI applies defaults. Unless you explicitly override it, you're going to get whatever the defaults are. Now, I encourage you to read the documentation on both accounts to figure out how OpenAI works in this use case, because for each model, you're going to have to understand what this means for the model that you're using, because this is going to be dynamic. So this is why I'm not covering this in the course, because there's too many combinations therein, and the course will never end. All right, as a result of that, let's go back and look at the prompt again. And now I'm saying I need you to map what this article is about to one of these 8 topics. Topics equal. Now, you'll notice I provided some weird formatting. Even though I'm creating something called Prompt Engineer, I'm talking to the AI in its love language. In other words, in the way that AI thinks. And I know that AI thinks very logically, very programmatically. So what I did is I used the key value concept. The key is topic, and in this case, the value is a table or a list or an array of items. And so I know it understands the syntax extremely well, and I don't want it to screw up. So this is why I put it in this format. Now I say, okay, financial performance, customer experience, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, these are the 8 topics. And then I say, here is the article summary. And that's the summary from the previous node. And so you'll notice that $JSON. And so in this case, this is how the standard OpenAI response object comes back. So I said JSON, message, content, and so only respond with a single value from the topics array. So I'm saying, I don't want you to give me any output, just give me this. And that's how, when you look at the column, I get a classification of what this article falls, like what bucket this has fallen. Now, this is driven from the business. The business is what dictates, hey, listen, I want to find what my competitors are doing, and I'm most interested in these key areas of the business. And so this is driven from that conversation with the leadership of that organization, because these are their 8 hot button topics that they want to keep the finger on the pulse of what's going on with their competitor. Yes, this is a grocery store, but this applies to any company that has competitors in the world, including yourself. So if you're doing this to start up an AI agency, imagine the power of what you can do with technology like this at your fingertips, and understanding how to leverage these tools to help companies do more with less, get better information. And research is one of the untapped potentials of earning potentials for you as an individual or for companies to make revenue and generate revenue for customers by simply going in and serving as, McKinsey, and Deloitte, and a lot of the big 4 of these consultant agencies and companies that make billions of dollars a year, this is how they make their money. And now little people, and I say little people, I mean people like me. I am the head of the snake, or the one-man band, so to speak, with a bunch of outsourced agents behind me to do a lot of the work. Occasionally I might need an assistant, and I'll hire them on a as-needed basis depending on the project. But you try to stay hands-on as much as you can, and this is really, really fun. So in any event, this is how you use AI inside of a workflow, and this is exactly this is a very specific, great example in a very larger scale type workflow. But even though it is a larger workflow, I broke it down into just very small specific swim lanes where it's essentially not really that complicated. It's just rinse and repeat at scale. So if you looked over everything that I had here on the onset before I did all of this. Let's see if I can go back a couple of million clicks. And start, restoring everything that I had. But anyway, this is about as far back as I can go. But this thing was absolutely at scale, and it got very intimidating looking, but it's really not that bad. There's only 2 AI components in here, and it does a fantastic job of doing what you need it to do. All right, guys, I've beaten horse to death on this one, so we'll leave it there. Now you understand, your use case obviously is going to vary, so leverage all of these AI options and opportunities. And again, you can use whatever you want. There's a sentiment analysis block there. There's even a summarization chain. So I even could have used that instead of this summary, but I know how to use prompt engineering pretty well. These are pre-baked models with specific intents to the outcome. I'm just a little bit of a control freak, so I did choose that. And I chose to choose, God almighty, I chose to have you look at the more complicated way in that use case, so that you have the intimate knowledge that you need to do anything that you want to do. Because I didn't want you to get crippled or paralyzed and say, hey, listen, what I want to do isn't in here, then I can't do it. And that's not the case. You absolutely can. Just use that AI agent, give it great instructions with prompt engineering, and you're good to go. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, I am back with another video, and I'm actually super excited for this video to share with you because this is literally technology that's on fire. Now, this is rapidly changing, so you need to keep an eye on what's happening within the industry if you intend to use this. I'll get into the security ramifications, and I'll give you a recommendation to follow for now, especially if you want to use this in production. And you should use it in production because it's really, really cool. So right now, let's get into MCP concepts, what it is and what they do. So first of all, MCP is an acronym, like all acronyms, and it stands for Model Context Protocol. Now, within, and I'm not trying to use a pun here, within the framing or the context of MCP, this relates to AI, agentic AI. But I don't want you to get stuck in your mind's eye saying that it's only an AI thing, because it could be lots of other things, even non-AI. And so I want you to think of MCP, and it comes in two flavors. So let's cut that out of the way right now. MCP is both a server and a client. So a server serves and a client consumes. And the actual functionality of what MCP is, it's a toolbox. I want you to think of it just like a toolbox. Now, when I say toolbox, this is the server. The server that serves up tools from the toolbox. Now, what is a tool? A tool can simply be a workflow or an agent. And one of the workflows that we've been talking about in scope to this section is AI. But I want you to think of workflows that just do something, nothing more than a calculator. It calculates something, and that's all it does. There's no AI in that. It just runs calculations. I want you to think of a workflow that goes out and just grabs news for today. You saw what I did previously with an RSS feed. Technically, that's news. And I also had AI components to it within the workflow, but it wasn't a chatbot either. But the point here is you can have a mix of the two, or just one, or just the other. And if you think of a tool in terms of a workflow in n8n, you're really going to understand this much, much easier. You saw another workflow that I did that had a summarization component that did have AI, so there's an example of both involved. You saw a classify, again, another example where workflow and AI work together harmoniously. I think I showed you my LinkedIn post, which is, again, a mixture of both. And then it could be simply nothing more than this thing does nothing more, meaning thing, tool. Tool does nothing more than processes custom code that may or may not require input parameterization, which means, for example, like a calculator, you could say, what is 1 plus 1? The parameters is the first integer of 1, the second parameter is the other integer of 1, and then you just add the two of them together, and the return value is 2, because we're asking the function or the functionality or the calculator or the custom code to do something like that. So those are just things that happen within AI. These are things that happen within a workflow or a combination of both. All right, so let's get rid of this and let's go over and see what this looks like inside of n8n. So again, client serves and a server serves and a client consumes. I'm going to show you the server first because we need to get that out of the way to create it. So the first thing I need to do when I'm creating an MCP server is I need a trigger that is going to fire off my server. So the question is, where do you find the MCP server? Well, you can find it one of two ways. You can type in MCP, and then all of a sudden you'll see the MCP server trigger. The other way you can find it is simply coming down here to the last item. As of right now, it's buried under the other ways. Well, not really buried because there's only a handful of items here. And then you can choose the MCP server trigger here. All right. Now, with this on the canvas, it's not very complicated, right? You have the trigger and you have a test URL, and then you also have a production URL. Now, let's get this out of the way so that you understand something. I'm going to copy out the test URL, and I'm going to come in here to another window, and I'm going to paste this in. And we're getting an error because I didn't turn the server to, well, I actually got myself there. I turned the server, I didn't turn it on to listen. And so now that it's listening, we won't get the error anymore. But we would think that, oh, okay, we got a response. It's not an error. We would think that this thing would have resolved with some feedback internal to it. And that's not really the way that this works. It's looking for a very specific payload to come into it, and typically these are handled by the client. So unless you're going to write a client by scratch, it's going to be a little difficult for you to do this in this context here. Typically you'll use the testing when you're calling it from another AI agent, from another workflow in n8n, which I'm going to show you. But in this context, if you try to just go straight away and hit it and expect to see a resolution here, you're not going to get that. So just know that this is the way that it is. And unfortunately, it is what it is. So I'm going to put my name in here, my initials and stuff, just to make this shorter because we can control the pathing of this. And now for the tools. So if we click on tools, because again, there's tools in the toolbox. Now, if you've read a lot of articles, or if you've heard of MCP up to this point, and you're a little confused why I don't use the standard discussion of what MCP is, which you probably have heard. Oh, it's like a USB port. You just simply plug it in. And so everybody's using that. And while that's fine, it leaves a lot to be desired for. And I believe they got that from the Anthropic website. So if you're not familiar with all of the different model providers out there, so OpenAI was a company that everybody knows. Anthropic was one of the owners or one of the partners or one of the big guys at OpenAI. He left. He started another company called Anthropic, and OpenAI got adopted and got into bed with Microsoft. And so that relationship transpired. And then Anthropic went and created this model called Claude, and that went out there, and all that came up out there. But they've gotten to bed with AWS, which was part of their Bedrock initiative and their AI stuff. So anyway, everybody's partnering up with everybody and doing everything. So if you're not familiar with Claude or Anthropic, so you can go look at Anthropic, right, and go to this Anthropic homepage and notice right here, front and center, MCP protocol. Like this is all over the internet. This is a huge buzz. Everybody's adopted this. So if you want to know what to follow, this is the authoritative source of all things MCP because it's they're the ones that created this toolbox / USB. You hear this? MCP is an open protocol that standards how applications provide context to large language models. Okay, so I want you to understand that a lot of traditional methods of what this is, it's in the context of AI, which is why I put it in the AI section. But I also want you to think of it in more generic terms because you can use it in really good and interesting ways as well. But these are just nothing more than tools in a toolbox and ways of getting it. And this is why everybody uses MCP like a USB port for applications. You just plug it in and it goes off to the races. So that's why everybody uses that analogy. But I want you to kind of forget that because it's a little vague. I know people try to, make it easily understood as myself. So I think the average individual will understand the concept of tools in a toolbox much better. And because this is actually an n8n as nomenclature called tools, it's just easier to wrap your head around. Okay, so let's look at what we can do at the server level to make tools. Now this tool that is built in under the recommended tools, this gets really complicated really quick as a first example. So hopefully this doesn't get too confusing too quick. So if you know the concept of Russian nesting dolls, these are dolls that go inside of other dolls. If you understand the concept of nested if statements, I think I showed you an example of that very early on in the course. So an if statement does whatever, but you can also inside of that if statement nest another if statement. And so this right here is call an н8н workflow. So here we're nesting in the ability to call another н8н workflow. However, you traditionally call the MCP server, this MCP server, from an AI tool, and it calls this. Well, this is not what this is. This is an MCP server calling an н8н workflow, which means that in this context, while we have all of these different workflows, I'm going to bail out of here. So while we have all these different workflows in here in н8н, when we're in this, we're simply turning our workflow into a tool that our server can serve up to somebody. This is why this thing is so powerful, because it can be anything to anyone that you need. So if you're a company, and you might still be struggling on, why would I use this? How could I use this? Okay, so if you're a company and you have one or more APIs, we covered APIs as one of the objectives of using н8н, or one of the main core benefits, and that you saw me create a simple 3-endpoint poor man's API, which could be secure. In my case, I used a JSON web token to secure it, so it was highly secure. But in any event, you can put one or more APIs, which has the API itself. In my example, I had 3 endpoints. So imagine if you had like 10 APIs, and those 10 APIs connected to each of them had 10 endpoints. You have a single MCP server now that can serve up every one of those 100 endpoints across 10 of those APIs. And so the point here is it's a single source of truth for everything that you need. The other thing that you can do is everything that your company does, functionality or whatever, if you can tie it in some way to connect to an MPC server, again, you're going through a single gateway to get to your company's single source of truth. There's a lot of power in that. Also, a tremendous load that you're going to put on your MCP server, because if you put all your tools in your single corporate toolbox, it's going to be whatever. The other thing I want you to consider an MCP server for is that there are lots and lots of MCP servers out there in the ether on the wild. So we'll do MCP server, let's do GitHub. Here we go. This is a previous search I had. And so this one right here, Model Context Protocol Server. If we go to this GitHub repo for Model Context Protocol servers, we will see links of reference server. Now, these are servers done by very prominent people. So, for example, Amazon Web Services. I talked about Amazon and Bedrock agents and things like that, right? But these are servers by other companies. Now, here's the caveat and the disclaimer around security. If you trust these vendors to use their server, then great. Otherwise, it's a black box. You're not really quite sure what's going on inside of that. Also sketchy third-party servers, like some of these I know, some of these I've never heard. So if you use them, all I'm saying is use them carefully and use them when you're absolutely sure there's a trust level between you and the person running the server, because there's a lack of standardization and approvals and security. So it's basically trust based on relationship, trust based on relations, things of that nature. So a way to avoid anything sketchy. It's so easy in н8н to build your own MCP server. Just use the traditional APIs and build your own server and connect those APIs or connect whatever those tools are behind your own. And then you know exactly what you're getting and you can trust that. So let's build out a real simple one with a calculator. I'm going to use calculator as a tool to my MCP server. Now, the name calculator is extremely important because this is what's going to be returned in what's called a manifest. So I want you to figure out if you have a client, an MCP client that calls an MCP server, and that MCP server answers and says, here's a manifest of all the tools in my toolbox. This name is one of the names that that name is one of the key name that shows up in the manifest of the tool name in the toolbox. So in н8н, I can't stress enough how important this name here is. So if I call this foo as opposed to calculator, foo doesn't mean anything. Calculator has a meaning. Okay, so just be careful how you name this stuff. All right, that being said, this calculator tool is very simple. It does what it does. I'm going to come over here to the production URL. I'm going to copy it to my clipboard. I'm going to flip this thing on, and flipping it on also saves it. So now I have an MCP server up and running, and I can use it in some creative way. So let's bounce out of here. Actually, I'm going to bounce in. I'm going to rename my workflow MCP server. Okay, so now I know that it is an MCP server. I'm going to create another workflow. I'm going to trigger this manually. Actually, let me change this out. Let's chat message, and we'll leave it as such. And let's add an AI agent. We'll do this. So this agent is connected to this chat thingy. Let me get rid of all this because it's really hard to move around. All right, so we've got that. Let's get a chat model. We'll do OpenAI 4.0 mini. That's fine. I'm not going to and through explaining all of this again because I've done it in previous videos, and I'll have other videos that goes into all of this. For this case, I'm not going to add memory, but I do want to use a tool. Now, this is what's interesting. Here you have this option front and center, one of the tools that you can use to an agent. But in this case, I want you to notice that this is a client tool. Super important. So at this point, I'm going to connect my SSE endpoint here. Okay, so this is the endpoint. I'm not authenticating. I could have set the MCP server to use authentication, but I did not. And so right now, this is just using the MCP client. I can leave it named as MCP client, and that's fine. And I'll leave it there as such. We'll click save here real quick, and I'll be like, okay, I want to calculate something. And so I'm in the developer testing mode. We're not using the chat interface right now, just using the tools built in. And it says, sure, what would you like to calculator? And I'll just give it the acronym SQRT of 49, okay, which is short. Hopefully you understand this. It's square root of 49. Now, with any luck, in a perfect world, if the demo gods love me and they don't hate me, this will go off without a hitch, and it will do its wonderful magic thing. But you'll see the client tool being called here. And now notice I didn't set anything within a system message. So I might have to go back to do this, and I should test this several times because I may find myself needing to add a system message if I don't get consistency and continuity of the MCP client knowing that it's a calculating tool. So the question or the answer that I want to provide before we get going is that this hopefully figures it out because the client gets the manifest from the MCP server. And remember I said calculator was one of the things that come back in the manifest, and I'm counting on that to work. And so that's what I'm relying on, knowing how this works, that the manifest is going to tell the agent immediately what this is, because this is the benefit of MCP. It's super quick. It's like Anthropic said, the USB port, I just plugged it in, and the AI with its self-intelligence just knows everything that it's doing. So again, hopefully the demo gods work, and it goes through, and see, it did. It understood that there was a calculator in the manifest for this server, and it went and did the calculations by using the MCP server. And you can see the tool here. And here was the query that went to the MCP server, because this is the client, and it said input square root 49, and it's almost like a function square root, right? And then the tool, the manifest came back, it was a calculator, and here's the description of the calculator. Now, I didn't provide this. This was all handled by the MCP client and server, all within н8н. And it says, useful for getting the results of a math expression. To input this tool should be a valid mathematical expression. It could be evaluated, or rather executed by a simple calculator, okay? And so here was the response. Here we got text. It came back as text. That's the answer. It came back as not an integer. It came back as text. So here, if I needed to do more calculations based on the result downstream afterwards by adding something else, I would have to convert that into a number or use a implicit conversion function or something that might happen depending on whatever tool I'm going to use. But the key here is you saw how that I could consume this all in н8н. So hopefully this illustrates to you the tools concept and the toolbox concept and the client and the server. And you may see acronyms being floated around by SSE. I think SSE stands for server-side event. That is mostly important to understand in the context of the server itself. So you might see SSE here in the URL. And all that means that's a server-side event. It's part of the protocol in the way that it talks. Much like FTP, HTTP, those are protocols for like the web TCP communications. Well, as it relates to MCP, there is the concept of SSE as a protocol. And there's one other one that I can't remember off the top of my head, but for the context of н8н, which is the context of this course, just know that it's SSE in this. Now, you might be able to change it, and obviously keep an eye on all of this as it changes because there's lots and lots and lots of changes that's coming around. I'm going to pop open the docs here because we're going to show you how to use this in a traditional code way. I use a tool called Cursor and Windsurf. I use Windsurf more often than Cursor. And I'm going to click over here to Windsurf settings, and I'm going to go to advanced settings, and I'm going to type into the search box MCP. Okay, now here I have the model context protocol, and I can add a server, or I can use a template, and it says no servers currently set up. So let's add a server. Now these are going back to what I said earlier. You can connect to any one of these servers if you trust the security on it, if you understand what's going on with it, and by reputation you trust these folks. You simply just click add server. Okay, every tool, every whatever that has, or application that has a MCP client embedded into its application has the ability to now talk to an MCP server. And so whatever tool application, this is Windsurf, these are the tools it chose to provide. But I don't know if you remember this, but when we went back over to GitHub and we clicked on this model context protocol servers, you know, there's a bunch of stuff, and this is not an all-inclusive list, although it is quite extensive. You can connect to any of these, and so whatever your software is, typically they allow you to add a custom server, and so that's what we're going to do here. Now, unfortunately, it's when you add a custom server, it's not so clean, it's not so easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in the URL that I copied onto the clipboard. That is my MCP server that I just set up and showed you. I'm going to keep it there for good keeping because we're going to need this later. I want to pop back over into the documentation because down here I need to get a template and example, and more importantly, I need this code block right here. This is the code for integrating with Claude Desktop, which is a programming tool that allows you to program with AI. You might have heard of it called vibe programming. This is where you use AI to write traditional code. And even if you're not a developer, you can still create software in a pro code way using vibe coding. I don't recommend it per se because it can create some really gnarly software, so you better have some context of how to be a developer. At the minimal, I would say vibe coders are really good when they are scripters of a language, like you understand the concepts, pretty much everything I covered earlier in this course, plus you have some hands-on experience as well, because AI does go off the rails and it's going to get you into trouble. Anyway, long short, I need to copy out this code because I need to use that code as an example here in Windsurf, and this comes directly from н8н. Now I told you I had to copy this off the clipboard because I was going to need it later. And here, right here in this line, is where I can paste in my URL. And I'm going to delete that out and paste in what I had here. The other thing I'm going to do is get rid of this header and the authorization and bearer token because I have not secured my MCP server. It's wide open. Anybody can talk to it. I highly suggest you secure your MCP server just like why you would secure a API endpoint. You just don't want anybody going in and getting into your stuff, right? And so I'm just giving you a demo. It's not that hard to secure it. It's very similar to securing the API that I showed with the JSON Web Token earlier, and fairly straightforward to do. Anyway, I am going to then change the name. This name up here that says н8н is the display name that's going to come back for the name of my MCP server. And I don't want to call it н8н, although I can. My MCP server or my MCP company server, whatever. I'm going to save. We're going to close this out. And now I'm in the settings. All I have to do is hit refresh. It will read from the manifest, connect to the server, read the manifest, and we can see that the name of my server is here, and the manifest has one tool, and it says the calculator tool. And now I have the description of what that is, okay? So all of this is super helpful. You can consume it now in a vibe way, or any software that allows or has a component of a client, an MCP client baked into it. You can then connect to your MCP server that you made and created in н8н. So this is really great, powerful stuff. And again, whatever you have your н8н MCP server do is the sky is the limits. So here in my server, I just had a calculator. But if you go back to the opening PowerPoint deck, that you can have it do and create anything that you want it to create. So if we look at this again, these are the examples of whatever you have to work with, whatever you want. The sky is the limit. All right, guys, that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, if you're new to AI or just getting started, then you probably might not be familiar with this extremely popular website called Hugging Face. This is where a lot of the geeks hang out. It was one of the original ones, along with OpenAI, early adopter, early to the game. Most people rely on it, use it all the time. All of the models, a lot of the models that are there, and some of the geeky stuff that I'm going to get into in the next video is really reliant on this website. So if you want to know anything about models and data sets and everything you get, they're all up here. So there are vendors that are out there like OpenAI. I already covered a little bit of Anthropic. We talked a lot about it because of the MCP server, which was the video just before this one, I believe. And these vendors are very popular in doing whatever, but there's a lot of open source models that you can run on your computer, you can run in a data center, you can run in the cloud on any one of the cloud providers that are out there. Obviously there's top 3 of Google. You got AWS and then Azure, but there's other smaller ones that exist out there that I like to use. Even Hostinger is one. Anybody that does private virtual server hosting or VPS, and I personally use Linode, or Linode is one of my favorite ones. And depending on where you are in the world, different countries seem to have different regional best, most popular places to host stuff in a private cloud. My point in saying all of that is that these are where you're typically going to run these models. And if you look at the top menu, one of the first items is models. And here is a bunch, and I mean a bunch, of models that are out there. Now, you can search and filter and sort. Now, this is the single source of truth of where you would go to get such models. And I'm not going to reference anything specifically. You can use tools like Perplexity AI or Google or whatever to search what is the top most popular or best large language model that's open source to use today. And you're going to get no shortage of articles and arguments about what's out there. I'm not going to get into all of that. That's for you to determine and decide. But, you know, for example, I like Gwen as a private model for coding. I personally find that's neat. 5.4 from Google, Microsoft is pretty popular and seems to be okay. But the point is, there's a lot of things out there. Even Llama's fairly decent. Llama 4 has a huge context window, although there was a bunch of Llama drama with regards to that a couple of weeks ago. I haven't followed up on it, but in any event, there was some sketchiness about how they built the model or how it was derived. And I'm not going to get into all that in any event. So one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about is, essentially, how do you go ahead and consume this? So I will flip over to here and I will create a workflow, and we'll come in here and we'll do a chat message so that we can get a chat object, and then we'll come over here to AI and we'll just do an agent. Okay, so with that agent, now let me close this chat window. I can connect to any number of these models. Now I will call out that if you want a single switch, a single point, almost like an MCP server. So yes, you could create your own MCP server to connect to a whole bunch of these. That would be a great use case and concept for that. But there are publicly already created ones. So Open Router is a really great website to point out. Now it is free, and there is mostly, it starts off free, but everything always winds up putting fangs in your wallet and sucking you dry. So unfortunately, while this is really great and cool, it is a one-stop shop to get to a plethora of private models. Okay, so they provide the compute, they provide the server, it is private. Now, argumentatively, there could be something said that Open Router is siphoning off data to sell back to X, and X, you fill in the blank, right? So there's that argument. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying these are some arguments that exist out there. Now, I can neither prove nor disprove. Honestly, I would say they probably aren't doing it, but we live in a world, and these are the times to where, I don't know, it just seems like you can't trust anybody anymore about anything, which is why I'm like, just do the stuff yourself. Go to the Hugging Face, go to Google, go to Microsoft, go to whatever, and run them privately there. Of course, a super skeptic that wants to argue against everything, that's cynical about everything. Oh, well, Microsoft is trapping in. And at that point, it's like, okay, well, you can either paralyze yourself and not do anything at any time, or you can just, have a modicum of trust and, kind of live in the middle somewhere. Otherwise, you're going to drive yourself insane. So do the diligence, do your best work. You got to figure this out for yourself and also for your company too. And there's a certain level of implied responsibility, maybe liability, depending on your job position and title. But in any event, this is where you're going to go to get to the models. How you host it, where you host it, who you choose to host it with is entirely up to you. Another option to choose is Grok. Grok has a couple of models too that's open source, not maybe a tremendous amount of them. But the other one here is Ollama. This is something typically developers use. They host it on their machine, although you can use it in certain use cases. I don't know that I would use it in a production setting, but if you did do it, or if I was going to do it, one of the things I would do is I would pop it up and I would stress test it to the max, to where I think, hey, in a real world use case, sorry about my, everything's just banging off. It's we're trying to record on Saturday because it's a little bit easier, but everything's blowing up anyway. So the key part here is, just knowing where to go and how to deal with all of this stuff. But Ollama is a really, really great choice, minimally for development, because you can host any model. Now, I made a call out to my book. It's AIGetStarted.com. It's mainly prompt engineering, but I go into very great detail with in the book about LM Studio, which is like Ollama. It allows you to host all of these models that's up on Hugging Face. It allows you to, well, not every model, but most models, and they have around flavor and spin-up stuff too as well. The other thing that you can do with this is learn how to use a built-in server that acts just like Ollama. So you have multiple choices here on which ways to go, and you can connect to a lot of the stuff that you see fit there. So one of the things I might do is I might use the Ollama model, and I use the credentials to create or to connect with it, and then this base URL, you could use this, but all you do is just change out the port number to the port number that is used by LM Studio, or even if you could write your own software and host your own models, and then you'd use this and just change it out to anything you want. So that's the way to kind of use use and play with all of these private and public LLMs. All right, that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video, and in this video I want to help you understand model quantization. I can't say that word, quantization, or anyway, parameters and context lengths. And I wrote this article on LinkedIn to try to dispel or help people wrap their mind's eye around it. I will put a link to this article in this video, so you should see that in the resource section. And when you see that, then one of the things that you can do is grab this information, go there, read it, and hopefully use it for whatever reference you want to use it for. All right, so let's take this in the order of understanding, and let's look at something on Meta Llama, or this is back to Hugging Face, which I had mentioned is kind of the single source of truth for most of the models, or the one-stop shop where everybody talks about it in a community. This is about as old as OpenAI when it comes to back in 2022 and whatever. Like one of the first ones out there that everybody's kind of gravitated towards. So in any event, I picked Llama 4 from a lot of lists. You can search for them. You can go under models. Anyway, this is the landing page for Meta Llama on Hugging Face. And if we scroll down here, we can start to see Llama 4 models, Llama 3.3, there's model 70, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so if we look at an example of this, we see Meta Llama / Llama 4. So that's the model that we're talking about by and large. But then we get some weird stuff like Scout and Maverick and all these other names. Now that's more of an internal marketing thing of naming convention, but then this is really the part that is key. The 17B. And so let's just click into one of these so that we can look at one of these model cards. And there is always information all over the place. Sometimes it's consistent from whoever posted to the other one, but not always. So if we look at this one, the 17B, the B in the parameters, okay, in the context of what we're talking about here is referred to as the parameters or billions of parameters. Now, I don't want to get into a scientific discussion of this, perhaps, as much as I do want to give more of a plain English understanding. And that was really what I was trying to do here in this article, although I do get a little more geeky in this article than I want to get in the video. But suffice to say, there are cards out there, video cards with memory. And NVIDIA is probably one of the better ones to discuss because they have a whole bunch of stuff that's out there right now. Let's look at NVIDIA. Here's the GeForce cards. Here's the 50 series, the 40 series. I don't want to get, yeah, I guess we'll allow them to spam us. So what I'm trying to do is get to the specs of some of these cards. And what I'm mainly interested in is the memory right here, memory configuration. Couldn't find it, okay? So this is why this is important. This is memory on your graphics card or graphical processor. And you might hear it referred to as GPU. And if you have one of these special cards, not everybody does, I get that, and they are expensive. They're literally as expensive as a computer and even more in some cases. And on my machine, I have a 4090, which used to be the king of the crop until the 5 series came out. And I'm sporting a whopping, at the time, 24 gigabytes of RAM on my NVIDIA card. There are other ones out there, and there's different drivers that you might need to use with AI, but by and large, the biggest, easiest compatible one, if you have the luxury, if you're in a position of privilege enough to have one of these cards, then, or to be able to afford one of these cards, I should say, then what will be an easy run of things will be an understatement. Otherwise, you're going to rely on your GPU, and for real big things, it's going to get hard. But the memory size in correlation to the parameter size is pretty much almost 1-for-1, and I would say, as a rule of thumb, this is my rule of thumb, this isn't any scientific discussion. Just because this thing says 70B, when I actually load up this model, I'm going to take, I plugged my book quite a bit, but I want to bring over LM Studio that I use in my book. And so when you load up these models, like I have Gemma 3, I have Llama 4, the 17B one that we're talking about now, and then I also have DeepSeek and a bunch of other ones. But you can see this is 8B, 17B, 4B, and whatever. If I take 17B, right, just to do simple math, 17 plus 5, I get 22. My graphics card has 24 gigabytes of RAM total. The problem with these models is once they're loaded up into memory, they bloat. And when they bloat, that means they unpack. And when they unpack, they're typically much bigger. So for me, 17B is probably pushing the limits of what my graphical card can hold before it tries to offload or offset some of what it needs to do to fit the model into memory. It might go into my system RAM, and then it's going to go out of my GPU and into my CPU. This one happens to fit just barely. Some unpack bigger, some unpack smaller, but the point is, whether this is a server or a personal machine is pretty much all the same thing here we're talking about. In order to get the highest performance, you need to align the parameterization, this B number, with the, not one-to-one per se, but you want to go at least 5 gigabytes or under. Another good rule of thumb to use is might be allows at minimum, bare minimum, a 10% variance. I would go as high as 30. And so I just typically know that my graphics card, like I try to go 15 and under. 17 is pushing it. I tried it just to see what happened. That model seemed to do okay, or that particular one. I could update the model and that might not be the case. But the point here is that the B is the parameterization size that you need to try to pair up to your memory card, and don't do one-to-one. So if you had 17 gigabytes of memory or RAM in your machine, in your video card rather, you don't want to just find a model. If you had 17 gigabytes of RAM, you'd probably go with something like 10 or 12 to allow some overhead for expansion. So anyway, all of this geek speak to say that, you know, even the biggest model that you can get on Hugging Face, you're limited to probably 27 to 25 in order to fit it in to get to the, you know, the performance that you're looking for and to be safe. This goes into the parameters. This goes into the parameter count. I'm not going to get into all of that. We talk about computational resources and trade-offs. You know, some of the parameter sizes and some of the other smaller models. This is in millions, 125 million. These are small language models, okay? And so they're tiny. This is 3.3. This isn't even a billion, right? We're into millions. So these things could run almost on Raspberry Pis. So if you need to do simple text completions, autocomplete, maybe summarization, some of these smaller micro models might suffice well, because some of the Raspberry Pi machines that you have are very, very tiny. And so you might need to do some edge computing with AI. And you could potentially call out to an н8н server or an MCP server, offload all the heavy processing there, as long as it had a Wi-Fi connection. And you could do some local processing with AI with some Python on the device, but you'd use one of these tiny micro models that's on there. So that's why that matters. The other thing, and I kind of harped on this a little bit, and in my Vibe coding programs and courses, I definitely go into this as well, the context length. So by and large, a lot of these context lengths are huge as far as what you can do with the model, okay? That means that when I send a question with context, it could be a file, it could be a, you know, a good example of this might be, let's do this. Write me a quick story about a mushroom. And so that right there, this write me a quick story about a mushroom is extremely small. The response I get back, even though I said small, is obviously proportionally much larger. Now, if I were to ask another question, context means it's going to have cognition or understanding of this plus this. And as you can imagine, as the conversation gets larger, as the conversation unfolds, more and more information is needing to be fit into this context. Now, the way that these types of things handle contexts is typically if it needs to flush its memory, it will get amnesia, meaning it will start dropping parts of your conversation in the middle of the conversational thread. That way it has the initial understanding and it has the tail, the end of the conversation. And anything in the middle then becomes inferred, not literal or actual, but inferred. It can typically try to figure out where it is in the conversation at the very end and how it started, so that context is king. But the middle, it starts to sacrifice this. And so this is why these context windows, you might hear them referred to, or context lengths, are tied to these mathematical numbers that you can see on what this is. And so you'll need to be very careful with your context windows. Otherwise, you'll get this middle amnesia in whatever it is you're trying to do, especially in н8н if you're trying to put forth large prompts. In an earlier video, you saw that I was doing for Sansbury a bunch of crazy stuff. And so I was only going one turn in and feeding it a bunch of information. But if I had a massively insane long article, it might forget the middle part of that article, right? And so anyway, you got to be aware of this, because this is where hallucinations start and get triggered from. And not everybody really understands why this is the way that it is or how it happens. It's not until you've been working with AI for a long time and you stay tuned for how all this is working that you'll run into this type of thing. So just understand that context length is absolutely king. And then finally, as far as what I want to go into this video, is this quantization or quantization or whatever. You might see things like Q4 and KM and whatever. And here I break down the tagging of the Q, the 4, the K, the M. And so just I'll read to you. The Q4 in this example indicates that the model's weight that are quantized to 4 bits. Okay, so in this example, lower means heavier quantization. Lower means better compression. It's almost like a golf score, right? The lower the number, the better. But sometimes if you've ever seen a JPEG and created it in some graphic software, if you over compress it, you start getting artifacts and blurriness and fuzz. I don't know, it just looks happy, right? So sometimes you can have too much of a good thing. In the case of AI, a high quantization level of 4 or 2 means that it's ultra compressed, but it's almost like going from, say, for example, 100 billion parameter model, and now that it's quantized to fit on your machine, it might be, 8 billion parameters from its original, but because it had such a high quantization number, it's super compressed, okay? So just know that the Q4, the lower that number, the better the compression, but also the lesser performing. You might be better off going with another lower billion parameter base model that has been quantized higher, like a Q8, even though that the parameterization is like an 8B over a 7dB. And those are typical to like Llama models from, what is it, Meta. And then the K stands for the quant method that is used. And this is getting into more scientific stuff, and then the M in lieu of the K can just stand for, just think about when you get into these mixed models, I'm struggling to try to break this down into more plain English speak for you, but this part gets more into the data science aspect of it. I'll just leave it here on the Q area. This will give you enough as a home learner running н8н locally or even in a server, at least to use a model, because this is getting so down deep into the weeds. Read the article for what it's worth and just take it at face value. It'll give you enough information to allow you to go to Hugging Face to pick a good performant model. If you have understanding of context window, parameterization, and the quantization area, I think you're good to go, and that's really kind of the scope of this video. So I'll just leave it here because this is kind of long-winded and really dry. And if you have any questions or anything else, there's lots of great information on Hugging Face. They go into each one of these. There's great forums that you can find out on the Discord, and Hugging Face community is also super, super great at helping folks kind of break a lot of this stuff down. That's honestly where I went when I was first getting into this a couple years ago. All right, that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to talk to you about two other pieces of software, one called Light LLM and another one called LangFuse, that you can connect even further to get benefits that I'm going to talk about here. Let's cover what Light LLM is, but first I need to kind of go 2 steps back so that I can go 1 step forward. Here is an OpenAI message model that I got from this menu of going into AI and then OpenAI, and then inside of there I chose this text actions of message model. That's how I got to this one. Now, to recap, without going fully into it again, OpenAI, as you may or may not know, was the first AI company to really popularize chatting with artificial intelligence. They made it cool, they made it popular. ChatGPT was all the rage. Anyway, because they were the first company, other models that we've talked about up until this point of the video, in this section, have created their standards of how do you message their models the exact same way. So whatever you've constructed for OpenAI, you don't have to change anything. The only thing that you'll change to is the URL endpoint so that it can talk to your model. It might be an Llama server. It could be an LM Studio server. It could be something you write yourself. It could even be now an MCP server if you watch the MCP video in this series. The point here is when I go into OpenAI, here are the credentials. And if we look at these credentials, one of the things that we can do is pass in the key, which gets us into the API. But more importantly, here's the URL. So we have the opportunity to change the URL. Now, programmatically, н8н has adhered to the very specific standards. Now, I'm going to digress so I can actually show this so this makes a little bit more sense. I'm going to go to the API reference. And the API reference has different things. Actually, let's go to the docs. And let's go down to models. And let's go into the 4.0 MIDI model. And maybe I'll do core concepts. Let's just do, I want to do chat. They keep changing the documentation, and it always gets so hard to find what you're looking for. I just want to get to text and prompting. Here we go. All right, so here is essentially the geeky version of what's going on behind the scenes. This is programmatically in code, but basically what you're doing is you're going to an API endpoint. And when you get to that endpoint with authentication, you're sending all this types of code. And this is where you're doing all of this wonderful stuff, right? And so here is how you generate text with some instructions. You pass along the model, you give a prompt, and then you put some input anyway. And then here you can see, here's the model again, and then the input, and then the role. You got a developer, you got a user. Anyway, you go back and forth. All this code, the way that this code is done, that's really my point in giving you all of that. н8н has already baked it into what they have on this node called the OpenAI account. So the point here is because all these other companies has used the same way of presenting that geeky code that I just showed you. All you have to do is change out the endpoint to your server. And so in this use case, now with that context, this will produce when you host it on your own or you buy and pay for their version of it. You will host this, and then you'll connect OpenAI on the backside of this. Okay, so here you see Anthropic. Here you see Anthropic. Here you see Azure. Here you see OpenAI. The point here is you have a gateway, a single point of connection into this Light LLM central server. So this is the URL that you would plug into N8N, and then based on that, you'll provide some additional parameterization to kind of specify the model. And the model is this here. And there's other things that you can do. Another benefit is you can have an endpoint look like it's OpenAI, but inside of the configuration of Light LLM, you can not only configure this, but you can have as an alternative fallback or a backup in case OpenAI were to be down. You don't want your application to crash. So then you'll use maybe Azure OpenAI on the backside as a fallback to OpenAI in the event that they're down, right? And so you might even use Anthropic as a backup in case OpenAI is down, or maybe they're flooded. The key here is that if you want to control things like latency slash productivity slash security slash, what is the other item I'm looking for? Not latency, but fault tolerance. I just described that. So if something's down, you have a fallback. All of these things can be done and accomplished with Light LLM. The other key aspect here is that if you have governance, if you have compliance, and your company needs to dig into all of that. Who did what, where, why, when kind of thing. And more importantly, oh my God, how much are we spending? How much is AI costing us this month? Maybe you only have a budget of $10,000 or $5,000 for the month, which is pretty small for, most corporations, at least the ones I deal with. But if you have a medium size or a local business that you're working with, maybe they only have a budget of $500 for AI. And you might even use something like н8н Labs, which does audio and stuff. Their budgets are what they are. But the point is, something like this will give you visibility into this, and you can cut it off and set limits on it long before what you get. And you get a lot more power and flexibility than what you get, for example, on the backside with OpenAI. Also, if you're a business and you want to bill back to customers their usage of what their application's consuming, maybe you have an application that you use and you rinse and repeat and light up instances of it, but you also need to connect it to large language model, and you need to bill back the usage that application is generating because of how many calls it's making to OpenAI. You're getting charged for it, and you need to maybe mark it up and charge your customer for it. This is a great opportunity to do it because then you can use APIs to connect to this to get the billing usage in a total so that you can just do a calculation markup, and then you know how to invoice your customer each and every month. So this is a great option. Additionally, inside of Light LLM, you can configure this optional and additional governance tool, which allows you to really get down into the nitty-gritty. You can trace on every single prompt, every single thing. You can eval, you can get metrics, you can debug your app, all kinds of really cool things that you can connect to. If you're a programmer, all of this stuff can be done in code, but this all can definitely work through N8N by simply swapping out this URL to this front-end mechanism or to a Light LLM's URL, and then you name the model just like you normally would name it, and you'll get, when you're inside of this tool, instead of this saying from list, you won't get this list as it exists from OpenAI. You'll get the list that's been configured based on what you set up in Light LLM. Now, if you want to see a full demo and presentation of that, I'll put a link to both my website, which has my YouTube channel as a shortcut on it, plus everything that I do if you want to connect. And then other things that are in here are, just stuff that's out there. This is the one right here, this video. So we'll jump over to this. I have a Transformation Leaders podcast that I do. It's published on my YouTube channel. I also have a separate channel for that too as well. Anyway, we talk about all kinds of really cool stuff as it relates to businesses and companies and all of this technology. So if you're into that kind of thing, these are some tools and resources that'll be, and you can watch the full length demo. We did a 1 hour, I did a 1 hour exhaustive demo. My partner, н8н, that we do on the podcast, and occasionally we have guests, so would love to have you participate and see that. So in any event, that's it pretty much for this video. I will link all of this stuff, so if you really want to chase the rabbit down the hole, you can watch that 1 hour show that we have there on YouTube. All right, guys, that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Hey everybody, welcome back to another video. I absolutely love this section with AI because this is one of the main reasons I love it. N8N is because of all the really wonderful cutting edge new modern AI tools and stuff that it gives you. It completely breaks it apart from any of its competitors, in my opinion. This video is going to be a little bit more advanced, and I just want to say from the onset so you don't waste your time, this is not a required video for N8N. You should watch this only if you have a very strong appetite and you're curious about everything, because this is going to get into a little bit more propeller head and geekish thing. So I'm targeting this video for those of you that are slightly a little bit more technical, that may know enough to be dangerous. I fall into that category myself. And I know N8N really, really well because I use it every day, but I also experiment with other tools. Now, to be fair, I'm not a full-on developer. I have been writing code and having leading titles and positions, working with some of the finest developers literally all over the world. So I do know how to read code. I can write it if I have to, but it doesn't come natural to me. It's a struggle. I'm more creative than I am logical when it comes to writing code, and I do write code quite a bit, especially in the olden days when automation wasn't as prevalent, and if you wanted to do anything, you had to write things in Perl or other programming languages or batch files to get anything done, especially for system administration. And it got really, really down deep into the weeds thanks to Microsoft PowerShell. And so a lot of that stuff was there, and Perl was on the server for like, PHP, pre-PHP days. This goes all the way back into the early 2000s, late 90s. When the internet was literally being born. All right, so I've completely aged myself to no end. Anyway, what I want to show you here is that the point of that ramble was I am not a professional developer. I don't write end-to-end software, but I'm giving you the concept in this video in case you might be more experienced than me on this. But for н8н, here is a simple webhook backend. Okay, I have a webhook that's set up, nothing fancy. I did configure it to respond to the webhook node, so take note of that. The default out of the box is immediately. That's no good for this use case. This is just a simple single query that I wrote for SQL. It says, give me the top n being it's a dynamic variable. And this is not anything you configure on the webhook input. This is how you form your query. Okay, so this question mark says, I'm passing along parameters to an API. And then whatever the value is, again, it's that key value thing, except for the colon, you do have to use an equal sign here. And this is optional. I could add foo, schnickens, whatever, equals this, equals that, equals. If I had multiples of these, I would string them together with an ampersand or an and symbol, and something equals some value, blah, 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 right? And so if I had spaces, I would have to URL encode it with a %20. Anyway, that's beyond the subject that I want to get into. So I'm just keeping the parameterization simple right now. We're just doing QTY5, and so that will return this response here. In order to get that response, like I said, I'm taking the $JSON. If I were to run a test on this, and I click the test URL, and it's now listening, and I swap out the production URL, webhook-test. That should work. Should work. What did I get wrong? I don't know. I did something wrong, or it choked, or something went weird. Let me delete that and put this in. Okay. Now the test URL is working. That should have fired off this. Yeah, it did. Okay, so now in here you can actually see. So JSON.query.quantity. We don't need to look at the headers from the webhook. We'll collapse that so that we can get to the real simple stuff. Here's my QTY5. It's a query parameter. Hence the word $JSON just means the node that it came before it. We've talked about this almost countless times already now. And so I keep telling you not to use it, to use the actual name. In this case, it would be $webhook, whatever. In any event, in this instance, it's just fine the way it is because I'm never going to move it. And by dealing with this, I go down to the query, which is this level underneath the webhook, and then underneath there is QTY, my parameter that I passed in, QTY, and its value is 5. So if I click on this, you can see the number 5. So if I were to just type the SQL statement by hand, select top 5 from whatever customers. The idea is that in the URL software, we're going to create a front end using vibe coding, which is the point of this video. But because it's н8н, I want to tie this all together in a bow to show you another use case of how and why you can use н8н for back-end development, and then use things, even if you don't know anything about writing code. I'm going to show you a way, and I don't know, this is going to go good or bad, like we're going to find out together. Because sometimes AI does a bang-up job, other times it sucks, and if it gets stuck, I might have to delete it and redo it again. It gets expensive if you get like a really bad model or whatever. But in any event, the URL, the parameterization, all this stuff is running, and if I click test to setup, you can see I get 5 items, which is the same thing that I've got going on over here. So in that use case, I should be able to delete the dash thing, and okay, good, it's still working. That's my production URL. I'm going to leave it as such. And at this point, I would just say, this is all well good, and this is done. And we'll save it off, and we'll hit test, and we'll stop it so that we don't have anything going on here. So this is done. Let's go over and do some vibe coding. I'm using Windsurf. There is no shortage of tools. I personally use Windsurf. I'll tell you why. Because first of all, price. It's only $15 a month for a developer. And this is the pro license. And then you can start getting into teams, which I'm not. I'm just an individual. You can use other programs out there. Lovable is very popular. We'll segue again. I keep finding myself going down these rabbit holes, but I want to give you enough information. And it's really the point of the course is the lecture should be helpful because there's so much to know. And I'm trying to do the best to create the ultimate course for you. So hopefully I'm living up to that to this point. In any event, this is Lovable. This is another really cool and popular one out there. Another one is, what is it, Blitz or something? Here, let me just talk to it. What are the most popular vibe coding programs like Lovable or competitors like Lovable out there online? Replit, yeah, Replit's another one. Hostinger, that's junk. That's no, yeah, that's it. Bolt, that's what I was thinking. Bolt.new. So Bolt and Lovable are pretty much almost one and the same, in that they do both the same types of things. Bolt is like Lovable in that they're online. They develop what they call an IDE, which is an integrated development environment, IDE. And this is where developers write code. And you might not be a coder, so Lovable might be something more up your alley. Bolt is also online as well, and it's an IDE, and it's even better at creating stuff like this. The reason I don't go here, because eventually you're going to skill up. And if you write a bunch of stuff in these platforms, you don't have a tremendous amount of control like you do with cursor, which are more desktop based and do the same types of things as this, but it's a balance, right? It's a blessing and a curse. So if you're completely intimidated, I would use Lovable or Bolt. And if you're okay with a little bit more control, then I would suggest Windsurf, because not only do you get the control and the friendliness of the other ones, you also get a lot more control. So that in the event or when, and it's something as stupid as this, you create an app and maybe you want to change the title. And I'm giving a stupid example. And for whatever reason, it's one line of code. It's in plain English. I just need to find the name of the variable or the token or whatever it is that has, something equals, and then there's the title that I need to change. It's not even a coding change. It's just a simple plain English change. And if you do it in Lovable and Bolt, in some use cases, you won't have access to change certain things. And so with this, you have 100% more control over all of that aspect. So if something stupid like that comes up, you have the ability. But you have the frustration and risk to where this is a little bit more on the pro level. Anyway, enough talking. Let's get into this. I am going to open up a folder that I created in advance of this. And where's my repos? Here's the repo, and n8n front end is what I have. So I'm going to select folder. I got nothing in here. Yes, I trust the author. It's me. Okay, so here I have the Windsurf interface, and with AI hanging out on the right side. This is my Copilot, or my buddy. And when I say Copilot, I don't mean to steal from Microsoft's technology, a whole nother thing similar to this, which is called GitHub Copilot. And it comes along free and a paid version in Visual Studio Code. So Windsurf and Cursor is Visual Studio Code, because VS Code or Visual Studio Code is open source. And they took the open source copies, which they can, and they augmented it for their own purposes. And so Microsoft is like, happy for the competition and also afraid of the competition, because these guys are doing some really remarkable stuff with Microsoft's code, which is, blessing and a curse. Anyway, the point here is you just speak plain English. It goes back to the whole thing about prompting. And the better your prompt, the more concise. And what I would suggest to you, and I teach professionals vibe coding in their companies. And so one of the things I tell them, and I'm going to tell you the same thing because it's not too technical. Rather than ask the AI to write the code immediately, say, I need you to help me with planning so that we can create something together. And so I'm going to talk to this by using the Windows key and the H, because I'm on Windows. I don't know what it might be on a Mac or a Linux machine if you're following along on those platforms. I don't even know if Windsurf is available on Linux. I think it is, but anyway. So I'm going to talk to the AI, and we're just going to literally go through this. I'm going to go really quick, and I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to copy this production URL out, so at least I have access to it. I'm going to put it in here, and actually, no, I'm not going to put it in just yet. All right, so I'm just going to talk to it, and you can follow along. Hi, I need help with creating a front-end application. I have an extremely simple back-end URL, which is a single webhook acting like an API with no authentication. So you should be able to access it, and I will give you an example of the actual production URL that you need to use and an optional parameter that I need to account for in this. I'm looking for a very simple web page that I can use to illustrate and demonstrate what vibe coding is all about to an audience that is watching me do this live. So what I want you to create is a really nice looking website, or rather web page, that takes in a parameter that the end user will use to put in a number integer, and they're going to specify how many records that they're going to get back from this API. I will provide you an example response so that you can see it. Now, this is the most important thing that I want you to remember. I don't want you to write a single line of code. I simply want you to write me a plan.md, which is Markdown. And that's the only thing you should create right now. So can you write out the plan so that you and I can build this together, and what you might use? I want to know the technologies, like, are you going to use HTML, CSS? Are you going to use React or Angular? Are you going to use any libraries? And I'm going to need step-by-step instructions if I need to do something that is a little bit more advanced for me, because I'm a beginner. Like, I don't know how to run Node. I don't know how to run a server on my local machine. Well, apparently I ran out of time or space. Let's see, if I need to do something, we'll do it again. I need you to also take into account, I'll need the commands to run if I need to have an emulated server to test the page. In any event, the following text is going to include both the URL with the example parameter and an example response in the payload. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to paste in that URL, and now I'm going to go back to the web page, and I'm going to grab this. I'm going to change it from 5 to 3, and I'm going to grab this like this. I'm going to paste that in there, and let's see what it does. So this is where I was talking about earlier about context window. Like, I just rambled on with a bunch of stuff, and н8н is, I'm sorry, not н8н, Windstream, not Windstream either, Windsurf, did I get it right yet, is, I'm working with this, and this humongous gargantuan prompt was used to give it enough context. Now, you notice that it didn't write anything. It just responding to me like AI. And there are modes in these tools. One is write mode. This is like multimodal mode. That means it can read and write multiple files at the same, well, maybe not at the same time, possibly at the same time, I don't know. But it can interact with multiple files. I think that's a better way of saying it. Or the chat mode will, if you're afraid it's going to write something, you can restrict it to chat mode, which means it can no longer interact with your code. You're just working with it like ChatGPT. All right, so let's look over what it's going to do. Here's a detailed plan.md, and let's see what it's going to do. Clean, modern, user, integer, fetches, tables, technology, library, HTTP request, framework React, using Vite for fast setup and hot reload. Again, I'm not a developer. I don't know what Vite is, but I know what React is. If I was a React developer, that might make sense. And project structure. This is all well. This is obviously some parameterization or something. So, I see what it's doing. It's telling me what it's going to create file-wise over here when it gets ready. So essentially, it's going to have a JSON file, an index file. These JSX, these are React files. This I know. That's why the src there. And the app.jx is essentially the main file, and then the index CSS is just like CSS and anything else. It's going to be used to control the page. The index.html is like the page that grabs it, and I think it has to do some routing to some extent because I don't know. This is why I never got into front-end React development. It's over my head, and it's very, very heavy in JavaScript, which I know for coding scripts, but again, writing this level, that's not me. Let's see. So make Node.js, npm, okay, create bash. All right, so I think this looks scary, but I think we can do it. Now, if you're watching this and you are a developer, you're probably laughing at me, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people that are somewhere between me and you and the beginning. So the good news is at least I'm in the middle. All right, so from this, I'm just going to tell it, type it this time, let's build our plan now. And let's see what it does. Now, it should start to generate all of the programming, and it's going to do all of the setup. So see, npm create, and so this is npm is a node package manager, and you need to have node installed on your computer. So I will call that out as a prerequisite if you try to follow along with this. If you install Windsurf and you go through this exercise, but you haven't done certain things, you will need to go to node. I don't know where the URL. Let me go off on a tangent again. Node, here we go, right here, Node.js. And so from here, you can download Node.js right here. This is the version right here, and this is 22.15, whatever. That should work. If it's the wrong version, then you will have to figure this out on the fly. But I'm okay with running this, so I say yes, and it's using the node that I already have installed. And now it says it needs to install the following packages. It's still running, so it's doing whatever it needs to do. And it's doing some magic under the hood with the large language model that I've chosen behind the scenes, which right now is GPT 4.1, which is under a promo right now. Instead of using a full credit, it's only using 25% of a credit for each call. So you get 4 times the mileage by using 4.1. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, down here is where you choose your premium models. You can see 0.25 credit, so it's a quarter credit. 4.0 mini is a quarter credit. Mini high is a half a credit. And if you start using Claude, which is a damn good model for coding, it's a full credit. And if you do 3.57 with thinking, it's 1.25 credit. So that gets expensive quick. This is insane right here. I can't imagine. So if you start using O3, that's a super big model on OpenAI. It is 10 credits and 7.5 credits. So good God, don't accidentally click on that or you will burn up all your credits in one fell swoop. Okay, so something seems to be weird or stuck here because it says running, but nothing's happening. And so it says it needs to install the following packages. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click this pane over here. This will allow me to see the terminal. And lo and behold, OK to proceed. It's asking me, well, it isn't asking me. Node Package Manager is asking me. This has nothing to do with the code, the programming, or anything else. This is Node. So if I were to be a developer, and if I was a developer and I was in a command line interface doing this, as the developer, this would be Node Package Manager or NPM asking me. So in this use case, I'm just going to say yes. And now it's allowed to do what it needs to do, and it ran, and it's good. And so if we look over here, we can now see we got a bunch of stuff, and we're going to do the npm install, which now means it is installing Node into this program because it needs, this is the framework to do what it needs to do. So what it's really going to write is really minimal and pretty simple, but it needs the libraries, it needs all of the packages to run and do what it needs to do. So I'm going to continue to work through this. Right now it's installing Tailwind CSS. That's another one of these package libraries. And this is why, honestly, I never got into this type of development because of the absolute insanity that becomes trying to keep up with this. And the reason I say insanity, and if you're a developer, you can relate to this, because I see this happen all the time, because like I said, I work with top developers globally. If you don't keep a separate environment for everything you're building because of all the different versions of the packages and libraries, these things literally get updated all the time. And your app can break in a nanosecond when you're developing and doing whatever, because all of a sudden a package falls out of you update one, and if you got, for example, in an extreme case, 60 of these packages, there's interoperability between each of them and compatibility matrices within each of them. You can figure out the equation of how many combinations that this thing can have. And if you accidentally or inadvertently manually update one or the other, then you want to do a pickle. So just be aware of that as you start to create multiple projects. If this is not building out things in a separate environment or in an area that is isolated or contained, if it starts running it on your machine globally, this is where you're going to run into trouble. So if you already have this stuff in place and you run into trouble, start looking in that area to help troubleshoot. All right, this one is going to initialize the Tailwind after it's downloaded it. Now it ran into an error. See, it's already got errors. The good news is it's seen it. It knows how to fix it, so that's good. We'll let it run its thing. We're still getting an error. And it's come up with another combination of way of running it. It's, again, still getting an error. And so now it's trying the legacy variation of it. And so it's just going through whatever it needs to do. And so I'm probably going to get blocked because I screwed around on my machine with a bunch of stuff one day in the past, testing something, and now there's probably this incompatibility error. And so let's see here. It looks like the NPX when a init command is not running. This is unusual. Hold on, you're going too fast for me. Can't read. This is unusual. The command should work if Tailwind is installed locally. This could be environmental issues. So this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. But we can still proceed manually creating the Tailwind CSS files. Okay. Yep. And so it's creating the files. It looks like the files already exist in your project or your root directory, which is expected after running whatever. However, I attempted to write these files directly. That prevents them from being checked out. Okay, here's what you need to do next, or let me guide you. Open whatever and make sure it contains. No, all right. So I'm going to take, I told you I was going to take a completely hands-off approach. I'm going to reject it. I'm going to hit accept all here. I need you to do what you ask me to do, and do it for me. I mean, I'm really not doing anything. I'm just 100% relying on AI to build this application, and hopefully it works. It says already completed, blah, 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 blah. Okay, it's going through and looking. Hopefully it's going to fix itself. And so I'm going to leave this literally go in real time. So this might be like watching paint dry, but I want you to at least see the experience of what to expect so you don't see me edit a bunch of files. As a matter of fact, I haven't edited pretty much anything. So there's all my gaffes, all my mix-ups and hiccups and misspeakings. I leave it in there because I like to keep my classes real. I mean, I'm not about being a video editor. This, you know, if we were live and I was gaffing and doing whatever, this isn't a YouTube channel. This is, you know, I treat these courses just like you're sitting in front of me, because you are, but you're virtually, and unfortunately we can't have a live conversation. So, all right, looks like it's trying to do something else. Let me shut up and get going on this. All right, cool. So what it's done is it started a web server for us, and we should be able to click on this link, which is giving us how to run, and automatically we get some errors, which honestly I kind of expected because of all the errors we were getting to just trying to get and run with it. So let's go back to AI. I'll move this off screen for a moment. I'll click accept all. Now that I've accepted all, I'm going to take a chance to refresh this. Nope, nothing's, still no. And I'm getting massive errors. Okay, I need a bit more details. Okay, well, I guess it wants all of this. So we are, let me try to run this again. Copy, move this off. I'll just paste it all in. So you can see I've not written one line of code. I'm just copying and pasting, and I'm working like I'm working with the AI. It is fully my assistant. And you're going to have to just, you know, work along with it like you're the project manager, and this is the employee. You've hired a virtual employee for $15 a month, and you are going to get code worth $15 a month. In other cases, you're going to get extreme value out of this and create some really awesome stuff. All right, so let's see what we've got here. It says it's still running, and there's, let's see, we got multiple windows of these now. Let's see what else is going on down here. And I don't see that it's waiting for anything. I'll hit enter, nothing there. I'll hit enter here, obviously, that's nothing there. So it says it's running the command. I don't see anything happening. Okay, because it is running, I have to stop whatever it's doing to send this. So I don't know what's happening. I don't see anything happening. It just says running, 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 and I don't know what to do with it next, so I'm just gonna hit stop. And we're gonna hit it again. Okay. Yep. All right, looks like it's opened up a third terminal. And it looks like whatever it did, that part's done. Let's reread this because it looks like we're right back to where we started here. Why don't see anything happening? That they were renamed or rewritten, but the ultimate file maybe you still may be seeing your old files, whatever. If the dev server is running, it may not have picked up. All right, let's kill everything. Okay. So if you can't read that, because it is really small, I said to it, I said, again, nothing is happening, and I killed everything, including the server. So at least it knows what's going on. All right, so it looks like it's run dev. Let me open up the terminal again. And let's see here what to do next. Go to the web page. And I'm going to the web page off screen here, so you should be able to see it, 5173. And paste in the error message there. Now it looks like it's running some stuff again. This kind of stuff can get really, really frustrating, and you might think it's worth it or not worth it, so it's entirely up to you, but back in the day, I worked with some sketchy developers from all around the world, and locally, as well as domestically, internationally, nearshore, offshore, anyshore, and it didn't really much matter. When you get a green developer, the way I used to tell people, especially when I was selling stuff that I knew that worked and I knew I had a stellar development team, I was like, $15 an hour is great, but if you want to go there, go ahead and go there. I charge $150 an hour, and that's fine. But if it takes them, 200 times as long to do the same thing that I can do in an hour, when you add up 200 times 15 and then compare that to what I'm charging you for the same value, the same delivery, at face value, the hourly rate is, I can't compete with that. But they also can't compete with the output, because at the end of the day, my bill is going to be cheaper than your bill. So the point is, you get what you pay for. And here I'm not paying much except for $15 a month for 500 credits. And if I continue to use this model at 4 times, I get 2,000 credits. And I'm not even sure how many credits I burnt through at this point. I probably burnt at least 20 credits, it feels like, but that's times 4, so maybe 4 or 5, 6 credits. All right, so please open your browser. Now it's telling me to open up the browser again, and I have it here, so let's refresh. And we still are getting, well, I don't know what just happened. Let's do this again. So this is frustrating. Anyway, at this stage, I am going to pause the video. We're 33 minutes in, and I know you don't want to see me troubleshooting this. At this point, I would be pretty much about to just delete everything and restart, because this is ridiculous. At this point, I feel like I'm going in circles, and we're not going anywhere. So I will give it this last time, and if it doesn't work, then we're going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll continue to go through the frustrations. You should be able to see my clock down here. It's 12:53 p.m., so when I stop, you'll see how long it actually took, and that'll give you a sense of time, of elapsed time in the real world, what you're going to have to go through time-wise to dedicate to such a practice. All right, so I am going to pause the video now at 12:53. I'll be back. All right, I'm unpausing because I got so frustrated with it. It is now 12:59. I went round a few more times. I just deleted everything, and I'm literally starting again. And this is the problem with the context window. I told you it gets amnesia in the middle. I'm afraid that the thread was so long in context that it lost its purpose. It remembered the beginning and it remembered the end, but it forgot what it was doing and how it fixed, and it's going nowhere. So either A, you can start a new conversation and continue to move along, but because nothing was actually ever generated and I didn't have any working code base to begin with, I just started again. And I used a little bit shorter prompt. This time I started off by passing it the URL with the parameter, and then I also gave it the payload response or the return response, and told it that I wanted to deal with this literally end to end. And so now I'm going through a second time, and I'm still getting errors, obviously. And I keep saying React. Maybe React on my machine because I don't write React. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe something isn't set up. I have Node, so it should absolutely run. I've downloaded GitHub repositories that had React, and they seem to work fine. But for whatever reason, I don't know. I just have a real hard time with React. Because of my lack of inexperience, or my inexperience in React, there is probably something that if I was a seasoned developer, I would know to give it parameters, or it's trying to make decisions and setting this thing up, and I'm just expecting it to know what to do, and it's getting something just slightly wrong. And that's usually the use case there. So you might have to change the technology stack, maybe not React, maybe Angular, although that's still based in Node. The point is, you may have to try a couple of different iterations of stuff until you get it right. And I'm running into the same problem where it says it's running and nothing's happening again. So I'll pause and I'll see you in a bit. Okay, so this is much better this time. Just had a couple of little bumps, told it to finish. I asked it to test everything end to end. And so here we are at 105, and now I do have my app. Whether this is pretty or ugly or indifferent, I don't know, but bottom line is it does work, and it works really well. I got 10, 5, 3, whatever it is, getting everything up to what I ask it to do, including an insane amount. That's pretty cool. It gives me cards. It gives everything I need. I can reset it. So it's done everything I've asked. Anyway, the point of this video was, it's unfortunately 36 minutes long, is that this is the life in vibe coding, vibe programming. And so, like I said, I didn't write a single line of code. I asked it to run everything, to set it up, and you can do this type of thing yourself. But all things considered, I mean, think about it, $15 a month, and you get this level of control. And, you know, even if it's not perfect, start off small. Ask it to do things like just web pages. Yeah, you might get frustrated like this, but you can also just tell it to do CSS and HTML and, I don't know, minimal, maybe jQuery or something. And you can create really stellar projects. You can create landing pages. You can create all kinds of stuff. But the key is when you mix vibe coding into n8n backend stuff, really powerful things are opened into whatever it is that you can produce value for customers, for your business, and or for the company that you work for. So this video is long enough. We're going to leave it here. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next video. Hey everybody, welcome to this video. We are going to now start the administrative section, and this is going to be for Windows installation. Now, installing on Windows is fairly straightforward and simple until you start or try to use n8n in a way that is, well, seemingly, oh, I just want to do something simple. And then all of a sudden, the wheels on the bus start to fall off. And it's by design. And the reason it's by design is because n8n is a business. And they offer certain use cases for certain people, and they make it easy in those use cases. Now, this is the ultimate course, okay? So we're going to kind of turn this in on its head. I will say this with the kindness of heart. I can't support you. So if this does not work for you, please don't send comments in the course for this particular section, because I can't and won't support this area. Because this course could be pretty large, and it's just me, and I won't have the capacity to support everybody on this. So rather than support a few people and not another people, it's just, this is not normal, okay? This is not ordained by n8n. This is kind of a hacky rigmarole setup to get you to bypass for paying for hosting at a hosting provider, or paying for an account to get a pro account or some type of paid account with n8n. This is for folks that want to run n8n on your machine in a semi-production, I'll use it like that, like for personal use. Maybe personal production use, I think, is probably a good way of framing it. That way, you're not doing something to where you're collecting money from customers and then you're trying to get really cheap and host it at home. That would be stupid, because now you're putting your business at risk. But, you know, I'm not calling you stupid. I'm just saying the choice would be stupid, okay? So it applies to me too, right? If I were charging people to, you know, run whatever workflows, and then I simply did that, well, first of all, you're going to get yourself into trouble with n8n, because that's against their license agreement. I'll cover licensing at the end of this section, but just be really careful and mindful about what you're doing. So I'll just say this is personal production use. If you want to take the risk or you want to run it in this way, that's fine. It's El Cheapo. Now, let me show you the normal, regular way, but then right before we actually do it this way, I'm going to change it up a little bit. So let's go to n8n, and we'll just pop that into the browser here, and then we'll get to the website. And then lo and behold, this website is here. Now, if you haven't figured this out, there's a start button here, there's a start button here. You might not be used to seeing this piece of software, but this is what they call VirtualBox, and allows you to run virtual machines. So I could be running Linux, I could run whatever. This is, or pretty much technology of almost yesterday at this point, because mostly everything runs in containers and Docker and stuff like that. But for the purposes of this video, I did go ahead and put it here, and I'm going to put this thing in full screen mode, and I'm going to do Control H. Let's do this here. Sorry, Control F. That's what it is. Cancel. Control F. Okay, we'll switch. Oh, no. I hit the wrong button. All right, I'm going to pause the video real quick. All right, we're after a little debacle of rebooting the machine. I'm magically back to where I paused it at almost, and so I'm switching over to full screen mode. So there is still at the very bottom this let me just kind of pin this here. I don't know. Can we move this around? It's been a while since I used this platform. All right, I guess not. So I'll unpin it. Once again, let's try to go back to here. We'll go to n8n. No, we're not going to restore pages. All right, I'm just going to jump right into the docs because we're going to go there anyway. So we'll get rid of this. Fine, accept that. And at this point, we're going to do hosting n8n, and what we want is the npm. All right, so if we come over here to npm, we can host this, or rather run this on the Windows machine using Node. And you need to know that Node needs to be installed on your machine first, okay? So I just highlighted this critical area. So first thing you need to do is, let's go down and install Node. It's pretty straightforward. Just click the download, wait for it to download, takes a couple seconds, open the file, click next, accept the agreement, click next again, next again, install, and just hang tight. Well, approve this, hang tight, let it finish up. At this point, we can click away from this browser window, and we'll just kind of hang out there. Let me pull up the installation window, and it's finished that lickety-split quick. Okay, now, what you can do is copy this, and if you have no intention of doing anything other than running n8n manually, And when I say manually, I mean you're going to type this into a command line every single time you want to run it. Now, the first time you run it, it needs to run a setup, okay? It's not just going to run. It has to download, it has to install everything. Then you're going to have to launch n8n, and you're going to have to go through a little bit of setup there. It's painful the first time around, but then it's fine. The key, though, is every single time you want to run n8n, you got to create a shortcut on your desktop or a Windows batch file, and you're going to have to run it like this each and every time. So I said earlier that if you wanted to run this as a personal production, this isn't going to work. Because every time you boot up Windows, you're going to forget, and then you're going to have to rerun this command. So there's a couple of ways, all of them argumentative, all of them subjective, and there's no shortage of opinion on how do you run n8n as a service on Windows. And if you go up to the community, you go up to the, like, it's been asked a million times, answered a million times, and there's a gazillion ways of doing it. I'm going to show you my way. Personally, for me, I'm not telling you my way is the right way. I'm just saying my way is right for me, and I'm going to share and show you my way. So if my way doesn't work for you, then that's okay. I'm completely fine with that. Again, go to the community. There's a gazillion other ways of doing it out there. I have been using a lesser known tool that's been out there forever in 5 days. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to avoid doing this right now. And the reason for that is I want to show you this other use case because I think a lot of you are going to probably want to do it this way. That way you don't have to be bothered with running n8n each and every time. It's just going to run like a regular server on your machine all the time. And that's real helpful because, I'm sorry about that. It's really helpful because if you start doing scheduled workflows or you have webhooks that can be called, you're going to need to make sure that this thing's up and running, long term. All right. The next thing we're going to do is I'm going to share one of IT's best kept hidden secrets for real geeks that do this kind of thing. And I've been doing this kind of thing for, well, almost 30 years. So probably 1994 is really when my career took off. I graduated high school in 1989. And anyways, ever since then, I've been doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And so as a result, I learned a few tricks along the way. One of these is this one, NSSM. Of course, I stuttered it, NSSM. What you want to do is look for this NSSM, okay? Now, don't laugh when you read what it is. It's called the non-sucking service manager, okay? And there's a reason for that. It doesn't suck. It's stable. It's solid. It works very well with Windows 11 or 10 or whatever here. And it's not that bad to set up. Now, it is a little geeky, so you're going to have to put up with this setup for just a quick minute. So let's quickly knock this out of the park. I'm going to go ahead and download it. I'm going to download this one. That's the latest release. It's like 2.24. Hasn't been updated since 2014. Okay, so what, 11 years? And it's still running strong. That's how stable it is, okay? When you don't update your software, either A, it's got security holes. I've been using it ever since. The way that it runs, to me, doesn't seem like it's a security problem, but, I'm sure somebody can point something out to me that I'm missing. I do not know everything. I just know my tricks of the trade that I've been using for a little while. In any event, I thought I downloaded this. Let me check the downloads folder to make sure I'm not hallucinating. Yeah, I did. Okay, so before I go any further, let me clean up so that I don't get myself spun around. And I'm going to go into the C drive of this machine. Front and center, first and foremost, I'm going to create a folder off the root called н8n. Then inside of there, I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to go over to the downloads folder, and I'm going to go and cut this out. And now we're going to go back to where we came from under that н8n folder. And I'm going to choose extract all. And I don't want to put it in a subfolder. I'm just going to throw it out into the root. Now I'm going to delete the zip file because I have everything in the root. I'm going to click into it. I'm going to get rid of Windows 32 because we're on Windows 11 and it is a 64-bit. I don't need to change log. I don't need to read me. And into Win64, there's this executable for Windows. I'm going to copy it out of the folder or cut it out of the folder. I'm going to paste it up here at the root. Then I'm going to get rid of the Win64 folder. So all I have is this NSSM and the SRC folder. These are the accompanying code files and package files and DLLs and other stuff or whatever it is here that makes the magical thing work. Okay? So we're good to go. We're set up there. Now, because we want to be able to run NSSM from a command line, period, no matter where we are in Windows, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to set a path to this folder, which is not, here, let me go up one more. Let me get rid of the 2-24. Okay, and so I'm going to copy this out, just like this. And now I'm going to go down to the Windows key, and we're going to go set up an environment variable. We're going to add this path to our path environment variable. So just type in env, and you should get this edit system environment variables. Click on that, and it'll pop up in this window that you may or may not be used to. Anyway, there's a button towards the bottom of the screen. And we're going to click on environment variables. For system variables, look for this guy right here called path and double click on him, or you can press the edit button, either way. And then down here in the last to the next line where there's an empty space, double click. And then when you double click, you can come in here or you can just click new, either way. And then just add this to the path. Now what this is magically going to do is something pretty cool where I can click OK. And now I'm going to go over to the start button. I'm going to type in CMD. And I'm just going to press the command prompt and just type NSSM. Not SSS, because I always have a tendency to hit it 3 times. So NSSM. Because we've added it to the path, we can now use it like a regular system control. This is important because we want to go ahead and run NSSM to run our н8n instance. That way, every time we reboot, it just works. It works just like a Windows service. There's no problem. There's no hocus pocus, no funny business. It just works. We'll come back to this in just a minute. We're not done. All right, now, when I install stuff as a user, it's just me on this brand new fresh VirtualBox machine. I'm going to go into the PC. I'm going to go into the hard drive. I'm going to go into users, and there's only the public folder and my user account. I'm going to click into here. Now, I'm going to say, because this is a brand new machine, you may or may not have your Windows machine in this state. If you do, that's great, because we can all learn together. Let's click on the three ellipses here, and let's go to options, because you're going to want to toggle some stuff on and off. Come over here to view, and the first thing that you want to do is right here where it says hidden files and folders. It says don't show hidden files and folders. Well, you want to show hidden files and folders. And the other thing you want to do where it says hide extension for known file types, uncheck that. You want to see your file types. I don't know how many times you've been burnt, or I've been burnt, by if you create a batch file and you give it a name like something something.bat. If you don't untick this, what'll happen is it'll put a .txt extension on it, and you think it's a bat file, but it's not. It's still the MIME type, the extension, the file extension, because you're hiding it. You can't see it. It thinks it's just part of the file name. Anyway, it screws you up every single time. Hate it. So go ahead, if you've got a fresh or almost untouched version of Windows, go ahead and apply these settings, and then you'll be ready for the next step. Now, what happened when I did this is I got this, you see how this is bright yellow and this is kind of faded yellow? If it's faded, normally it's like stuff that would have been hidden, but now it's visible because you've set this option. And there's a bunch of cool things that usually wind up floating around in here for one thing or another, and we want to be able to get in and out of that for whatever reason, and I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, now with that being said, we have all of this set up. The next thing that we're going to want to do is we want to run н8н as a service account, okay? And the reason for that is, if I come over here to the settings for this machine, I have to, when I set up Windows, at least now yours might be different, but at least ever since Windows 10, I don't think this has changed for a lot of you. You have to have an account with Microsoft in order to set up Windows. It's a real pain in the you-know-what. It can be argumentatively said it's more secure, and in some cases it is, but in other cases it makes life harder and more frustrating. So we're going to get around this because I can't apply a password to my user account, because this is bound on the side of Microsoft. And so if I right click on the start button again, and I go to computer management, and I wait for that window to pop up, if I come over here to local users and groups, and I click into users, you're going to see my user account here. But if I try to set a password for my account, it's going to fail. It's going to say I'm logged in, you've chosen to reset the password of a local account, hitting reset, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, if I do this, it's going to create problems because Windows Hello wanted me to set up a PIN. It's going to break apart my multi-factor authentication. It's going to break the PIN. It's going to break the hello. It's a pain in the ass. Sorry about using strong language, but unfortunately that's what it is. And in any event, what we want to do is create a service account to run n8n as. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a brand new user account. Again, if you forgot how I got here, let me close this down so we can go through this again because I know I'm going fast. Right click on the start button. Find where it says computer management. Click that with a left click and then just wait. And then you want to click on the local users and groups and then double click into users. Now in the white space over here, just right click and choose new user. I'm going to give it a username of н8н-admin. Okay? And I suggest you give it whatever name you want. Because I'm using this name in the video, because this could be insecure, I want you to change the name. Don't copy this name, because if you do, follow it verbatim. God forbid this course gets super popular and lots of people know about it and they find your machine, they get into it, they take a chance, and lo and behold, they get in. That's your fault. I'm telling you not to do that, okay? So come up with your own name, just remember what it is, and write it down, and make sure that you do write it down. All right, now the next thing you want to do, I'm going to be really dangerous. I'm okay because I'm giving the video and I'm deleting this virtual machine when I'm done. Uncheck the user must change the password at the next login. Set the user cannot change the password because you as an admin, you want to make sure you change it. And God forbid if somebody did get the password, you don't want them to be able to change it. Next, you want to have the password never expires. Now I'm going to set the username and the password, and this is the insecure part. I'm going to set the username and the password the exact same, just for the illustrations and making my life easier for this video. I can't tell you how many times again and again, don't do this. That would be really, really poor decision. So I'm going to hit create, and now I've created the user. So the user account is made. All right, now why did I go and do all of this? I'm going to clean up again and shut down everything. Let's go to the C drive, and I want to show you a couple things. So under users, we have н8н, and we don't have that new user. And that's because I haven't logged into the computer as that user yet. Okay, I am going to bring this over here so you can see what this is. We are going to run a command line, and this is where the command line is located in Windows, okay? So if you were to just run this, it's the same thing as running CMD, and I'm gonna hit enter, and you get a command line, okay? That's what that piece does, and I lost my screen. Okay, so that's what that part does. This /K and this run as, it's going to now run this exe as that new user, okay? So let's copy this off. Let's go to run. Whoop, sorry. Actually, I gotta change something in my virtual machine because I lost my screen again. All right, I'm gonna move this out of the way just for a second because I keep losing it. And I'm gonna minimize this. I need to do something else to my virtual machine. and I need to do that under, I think, devices, and then shared clipboard. It's disabled. I want to be able to copy from my machine into this virtual machine. So I'm going to turn this to bidirectional. That way I can copy and paste stuff and we won't worry about getting lost. All right, I'm going to copy this out. And now that it's copied, I'm going to choose right click in the desktop, and I'm going to choose new shortcut. Now I'm going to paste that command in. Okay. So that's going to run as this user, and I'm going to click next, and you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call mine н8н-admin because I'll know what it is. This way, I can always get to a command line as this user. Now I'm going to double click it, and it says enter the password for н8н-admin. So I'm going to type in my n8n-admin because that's the stupid password I put in there. And now what happens is I get a brand new window. I want you to read this because this DOS box, this other DOS box or command line box, window, whatever you want to call it, is running now as, it says running as lab01 н8н. That means lab01 is the name of this machine, okay? And that's the user. So now I am running н8н as this, I'm running the command line as our service account. All right, and the reason that is all this needs to be done the way that I'm doing it is because, again, we can't change the password. And when we start configuring NSSM, we're going to configure it to run as this user. Because if we don't, then it's going to be a problem. You could run it as a system account, but I don't suggest you do that because then that has absolute unobliterated God rights to everything. And right now, if you notice, I just created the user. I didn't add this user to the local administrator. It's just a user. God forbid if it did get hacked or whatever, it's just a user on the account. They can still create absolute hell and mayhem if they were to get into your machine for whatever reason. But it's about as secure as it's going to get without, going nuts. All right, now that we're finally at this stage, the next thing that we can do is, and the next thing we want to do, and I'm going to go ahead and close this other window down. We're going to run this npx н8н, and we're going to do this the first time. And unfortunately, you're going to have to get into this DOS box just like this. So that's why I created a shortcut so that when you upgrade this, because н8н comes out with a new version, it seems like every other week-ish or less or more. And every time you upgrade it, you're going to want to be in this side because you want to run it as the user you ran this originally at. And the reason for that is it creates a database, it creates configuration files, and if you start creating this thing as different users all the time, you're going to lose your data, you're going to lose your workflows and the credentials you set up, and you're going to freak out because all your stuff's gone. So that's the other reason for making sure we keep this all in one tidy area. All right, so I am in as this user. I'm just going to go ahead and run this, and this is just regular standard as if you took the easy way out and you just followed this directions and you ran it as usual. The problem with running it this way, again, every time you want to have н8н run, you got to open up a command line and manually click this, or you got to create a batch file on your machine. It won't run as a service. If you reboot or you lose power or you turn your machine off, well, if you turn your machine off, nothing's going to work no matter what you do. But in any event, that's what's going on here. So this is the reason we're setting all this up. I'm going to pause here, and I'm sorry, I probably should have clicked yes. I'm going to pause here because this video is already 23 minutes and we still got a couple steps to do yet. Just a quick unpausing so you can see this thing now that it's installing, and it does take a while. It's taken like maybe almost 2 minutes, a minute and a half-ish to get to this point. So if it goes really slow for you, that's normal. Just be patient, let it do its thing, and you'll start seeing like this, stuff like this. Don't worry, these are warnings, they're not errors. It's just, you can read it, it's plain English, but just let it run, and I'll show you in a couple seconds what it looks like when it's done. All right, so now we have got this new pop-up that just showed up. You want to allow public networks, and that's because you want to make sure that this can talk to the internet and it can get to where it needs to be. So you want to allow access. And you'll have to provide your PIN. Okay, that being said, life is good, and н8н is officially installed. And let's hit O, like it says, to launch this up. I might have to put the focus in there. Okay, good, it worked. And now, lo and behold, well, shoot. Let's see, sync without your data. I got all this annoying stuff. Let's continue. This is so annoying. So I can get rid of this, Okay, this is the н8н setup to make sure that the server is finally done. All right, so I'm just going to do these and we'll just do, what was it, н8н, I don't care, we'll just make it insecure admin. That way it's easy to remember and I don't have to get lost. Okay. I want to receive, no I don't. What, okay, I guess it's not gonna work. That's not gonna fly. I need 8 characters, at least one number, and one capital letter. So, let's try this again. Capital N, 8, capital N, dash, what did I say, admin? admin. So, what do we got here? We got some capitals, we got 3, yeah, we got 8 characters. And that should be enough to at least get us in, and unfortunately, it's gonna have a survey, which is a pain in the neck, but that's the cost of free software, right? So minimum inconvenience for so much value. And this is taking an unusually long time, probably because I've registered this account for a bunch of different labs, and they're like, who is this guy? All right, well, I am about gonna, I'm tempted to put the pause again. All right, so while this thing's figuring out what it wants to do or not want to do, let's take the time to explore this a little bit further. Let's go to this PC, let's go to the C drive, and more specifically, let's go into users. And now we have an н8н admin because we've been doing stuff as that user in the DOS prompt. And if we go into this, we're going to get the security pop-up because this isn't our account, this is another user's account, but you should be an admin on the box, so you'll be able to get and have the privilege to get into this lower level. And so once this ACL clears, I don't think my virtual machine's gone haywire here. Everything seems to be just choking along. All right. Good Lord, nothing wants to just run. Everything wants to spin. This is insane. All right, I'm going to pause the video because I'm probably going to have to reboot at this point because this thing's gone amok. Just to let you know real quick, I am rebooting the machine, and this seems to be the culprit because updates seem to have been running in the background, and anyway, now it's applying the update, so unfortunately I'll be right back. Okay guys, so I did have to reboot, and I have rebooted, and I'm going to show you the pain in the neck why we're doing what we're doing, because I just rebooted, this is what you would have to do when you are not running this as a service. So you won't have this step because you're logging in as this other user, but you will have a DOS box, and you're going to have to run npx н8н each and every time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to log in as н8н-admin. Okay, so that's the step that you wouldn't have to do, but you would have to do this. So just imagine you opened up a DOS box, you got this, you have to type npx н8н each and every time just to get the server to start up and run. And this is the part of what we're trying to eliminate so that we can just run н8н as a Windows service and we don't ever have to deal with this kind of thing anymore. So that being said, I hit O. I should get right back into where I was, unfortunately, originally. So that was dtsoden@outlook.com. David Soden, password was capital N, 8 capital N dash ADMIN. Let's double check, make sure that that's still the way it was. Okay, that looks fine. All right, much better, much faster. We're not saving any passwords. You do have to, unfortunately, answer the first question. I just say other and hit get started and hit skip. All right, now we're in. We have a working running copy, but now we just need to solve the problem of setting this up as a service account. So we're almost there. Okay, so because this is running as a service account, or not running as a service account, we're going to kill the server. But keep in mind, we're going to keep this here because every time we update н8н, we're going to want to go into there and run the npx or npm update н8н. And we're not going to get there yet, but give me just a second. And let's open up the file system. Let's open up the C drive. And remember, we put this н8н drive up here? All right, we're going to have one more folder. We're going to call this logs. And you'll see why in just a minute. Okay, now that we've got this running like this, because we're not needing to do this as the service account, we can configure this part as us. So we'll just type in cmd, and I'm going to go ahead and I'll do this. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to type nssn.